Chapter 25:18. Yin Shen's breakthrough could be said to be silent. Outsiders had no way of knowing about it. The heavenly tribulations of ancestor realm experts didn't appear in Yin Shen's case. Yin Shen's breakthrough could be said to be silent. Outsiders had no way of knowing about it. The heavenly tribulations of ancestor realm experts didn't appear in Yin Shen's case. The reason why Yin Shen didn't attract the heavenly tribulations was actually very simple. To put it bluntly, the heavenly laws didn't acknowledge Yin Shen's breakthrough and felt that he wasn't an ancestor realm expert. Naturally, the heavenly tribulations didn't descend. He was completely unaware of his current situation and didn't know that he didn't have much time left. In order to break through the so-called ancestor realm, Yin Shen could be said to have paid the price of his life. It was like the final madness. After the madness, everything would turn into nothingness. His eyes were filled with excitement. Following Yin Shen's breakthrough, He and the other two also appeared in front of him. When they saw the extremely excited Yin Shen, a trace of disdain flashed across their eyes. However, on the surface, He still spoke with a smile on his face. "Not bad. You have successfully broken through to the ancestor realm." It seemed like he was praising Yin Shen, but He didn't think so. Hearing He's words, Yin Shen stood up and cupped his hands. "Thank you, senior." He was still foolishly thanking He and the other two. This person was so stupid that it was simply laughable. He and the other two didn't say much in the face of Yin Shen's gratitude. They came out of seclusion together and went to their residence in Yun City. Yin Tianyi was also present. "All right, we have completed our mission. Now, your Mu Tian Mountain strength isn't weaker than the Sword Sect. The Deputy Sect Masters are also half-step Emperor Realm experts. Many of your disciples are also improving rapidly. They can definitely fight with the Sword Sect." He said softly. Hearing this, Yin Shen was delighted. However, he immediately frowned and said, "Senior, are you leaving?" From He's words, Yin Shen naturally understood that the three were preparing to leave. He and the other two despised him in their hearts. What an idiot. He had already done what he needed to do. If he didn't leave, would he wait for Lin Yuan and Gong Nantian to kill him? This was especially true for He and Chi. They had already lost a devil image avatar previously. Therefore, it was naturally best that they did not lose another devil image avatar. Lin also said that the ownership of the Great Thousand World was not important. Anyway, it was enough to make the Immortal Palace and the Cloud Palace unhappy. Now, with the help of the three of them, Mu Tian Mountain was no longer the same as before. Of course, all of this was just for show. The people of Mu Tian Mountain wouldn't be able to live for long, especially the higher-ups of Mu Tian Mountain. Every single one of them had been planted with a demonic seed. When the demonic chi backfired on them, they would know what the outcome would be. Of course now, the people of Mu Tian Mountain seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. Now that the matter was settled, all they had to do was sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. How much trouble Mu Tian Mountain could cause for the Sword Sect was not something that Mo and the other two needed to care about. As such, when he heard Yin Shen's words, Mo smiled and said, "It's about time. You guys settle the matters of the Great Thousand World by yourselves. However, it's best to wait until Lin Yuan and the others leave. After all, with Mu Tian Mountain's current strength, we are not qualified to provoke them." Mu Tian Mountain could contend with the Sword Sect, but it was far from being qualified to contend with Lin Yuan and Gong Nantian. Lin Yuan and Gong Nantian obviously could not stay in the Great Thousand World forever. Therefore, waiting for them to leave was the best choice. When Mu Tian Mountain and the Cloud Palace fought, the entire Great Thousand World would be in chaos again. This was the goal of Mo and the other two. As for time, they were not in a hurry. Even if they planted a demonic seed, they could at least jump around for a few years. As for Lin Yuan and Gong Nantian, it was impossible for them to stay in the Great Thousand World for a few years. Hearing Mo's words, Yin Shen was reluctant, but there was nothing he could do. After all, if Mo and the other two wanted to leave, Yin Shen could not stop them. They did not stay for long. Soon, Mo and the other two left. As for Yin Shen and Yin Tianyi, They were full of confidence at this time. However, they still remembered Mo's instructions to wait until Lin Yuan and Gong Nantian left. They did not know what happened at Mu Tian Mountain. At this moment, everyone in the sword sect was looking at Xin Yuan Ling, Long Qing, and the other two. It had been more than a month since they entered seclusion. At this moment, violent spirit energy was constantly emitted from the cave mansion where Xin Yuan Ling and the other three were. It was obvious that it was time for them to break through. Everyone was nervous because Xin Yuan Ling, Long Qing, and the other three were breaking through to the Emperor realm this time. Under everyone's nervous gaze, a few days passed. On this day, 4 terrifying auras soared into the sky from the cave mansion where Xin Yuan Ling and the other three were. Suddenly, a dense heavenly punishment appeared in the sky. Heavenly punishment? They broke through? Feeling the pressure of heavenly punishment, Song Xing and the other vice sect masters appeared immediately. Looking at the heavenly punishment condensing in the sky from afar, they all had excited looks on their faces. The appearance of heavenly punishment proved that Xin Yuan Ling and the other three had successfully broken through. At the same time, in the cave mansion, Xin Yuan Ling and the other three who had successfully broken through were also very excited. During the seclusion, the 4 of them had successfully broken through to the Emperor realm. This could be said to be a miracle. Of course, it was more due to the help of Lin Yuan and Gong Nantian. If it were not for Lin Yuan, Gong Nantian, and the other two, Xin Yuan Ling and the others might not have been able to break through to the Emperor realm so smoothly. But no matter what, the final result was that the 4 of them had succeeded. How could the 4 of them not be excited? However, before the 4 of them could be happy for too long, Lin Yuan had already spoken. All right, prepare to take on heavenly punishment. Having said that, Lin Yuan, Gong Nantian, and the other 2 left. Heavenly punishment could only rely on the strength of Xin Yuan Ling and the others. If Lin Yuan and the others took action, not only would they not be able to help Xin Yuan Ling and the others, they would also harm them, just like Xie Tian. Hearing Lin Yuan's words, the smiles on Xin Yuan Ling and the others' faces disappeared. Then one by one, they raised their heads to look at the sky, feeling the strong heavenly punishment. They left the sword sect at the same time. The destructive power of heavenly punishment at the Emperor realm was very great. If they were in the sword sect, the impact of heavenly punishment would be too great. Therefore, Xin Yuan Ling and the others chose to leave the sword sect immediately and go to a deserted place to pass heavenly punishment. When the 4 of them left, heavenly punishment naturally followed closely behind. Soon, the strong heavenly punishment pressure above the sword sect dissipated. However, everyone's eyes were now looking in the direction where Xin Yuan Ling and the others left. Whether they could pass heavenly punishment or not, this was the final test. However, many people still believe that with the strength of Xin Yuan Ling and the others, there shouldn't be too much of a problem. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 25:19. The Emperor Realm's heavenly punishment was naturally not to be underestimated, but Xin Yuan Ling and the other 4 were all extraordinarily talented and had many means of their own, so it should not be difficult for them to overcome the Emperor Realm's heavenly punishment. In a wasteland far away from the sword sect, the heavenly punishment fell, and Xin Yuan Ling and the other 4 faced it head-on. Everyone in the sword sect was waiting for the result of the 5's breakthrough, and in the end, Xin Yuan Ling and the other 4 did not disappoint. After about 2 hours, Xin Yuan Ling and the other 4 returned one after another. Although the 5 of them seemed to be injured, the result was perfect. The 5 of them had successfully overcome the Emperor Realm's heavenly punishment and stepped into the Emperor Realm. The 5 of them returned to the sword sect one after another, and in the main hall of the sword sect, after swallowing healing pills, the injuries of Xin Yuan Ling and the other 4 were quickly under control. Then, a look of unconcealable excitement appeared on their faces. The Emperor Realm, once upon a time, was the strongest existence in the Great Thousand World, an existence that people could only look up to. Today, Xin Yuan Ling and the other 4 had finally reached this step. Even Song Xing and the other vice sect masters of the sword sect looked at the five with envy in their eyes. There was nothing they could do. The current Xianyuan Ling and the other four had already surpassed them. With the five's breakthrough, in addition to the sword sect, the Moon Palace, Saber sect, and Heavenly Policy Palace also ushered in the era of two emperors in the Great Thousand World. If it was in the past, many forces would not have dared to imagine having two emperors. Moreover, if anyone could achieve this, they would have dominated the Great Thousand World long ago. But now, even if these three forces had two emperors, they were still incomparable to the sword sect because at the same time, Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing had also successfully stepped into the emperor realm. With the breakthrough of Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing, the sword sect now had four emperors. Moreover, Jun Weihao was still in seclusion, and no one knew if he could break through to the Ancestor Realm. Once Jun Weihao broke through to the Ancestor Realm, the strength of the sword sect would skyrocket. It could be said that this time, Xiao Xiao, Dao Ju, and Li Chun were basking in the glory of the sword sect, and the sword sect was willing to give them some benefits to tell the other forces that there was no harm in surrendering to the sword sect. Just look at the Moon Palace, Saber sect, and Heavenly Policy Palace. After submitting to Sword's Gate, these three forces now had two sovereigns. Compared to the other forces, they were instantly much stronger, and this was all thanks to Sword's Gate. Because of the successful breakthrough, the five of them were very excited. Of course, this kind of excitement was understandable. After all, the Emperor Realm was really the ultimate goal for cultivators in the Great Thousand World. After all, before the Great Thousand World was connected to other universes, the Emperor Realm was the ultimate dream of all cultivators, and it was also the existence that stood at the top of all cultivators. Who didn't want to become an Emperor Realm Master in this life? However, a venerable sovereign was like a chasm that blocked everyone's path. After all, only a few people were able to cross this chasm. Now that Xianyuan Ling and the other four had finally crossed this chasm and fulfilled their ultimate dream, it was naturally exciting. Not only the five of them, but everyone in the sword sect was also celebrating. After all, the sword sect's strength had become even stronger. For emperors in a single sect, what kind of concept was this? It was probably something that they wouldn't have dared to imagine before. However, while everyone in the sword sect was celebrating, Lin Yuan, Gongnan Tian, and the others were already preparing to leave. They had already done what they needed to do. According to the current situation of the Great Thousand World, there shouldn't be any problems with the sword sect's strength. Lin Yuan, Gongnan Tian, and the others obviously couldn't stay here for long. But when it came to leaving, the person who was the most unwilling was undoubtedly Mu Jun. Lin Yun was still in seclusion in the Source Land, and Mu Jun was naturally reluctant to leave at this time. I want to stay in the Great Thousand World. Mu Jun looked at Gongnan Tian and said seriously. Hearing this, Gongnan Tian couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. How could he leave Mu Jun alone in the Great Thousand World? If anything happened to Mu Jun, Gongnan Tian had no doubt that Mu Lingxian would definitely skin him alive. Therefore, Gongnan Tian refused without hesitation. Young master, don't make things difficult for me. It was definitely impossible to leave Mu Jun alone in the Great Thousand World. Hearing this, Mu Jun's face darkened, and he was somewhat displeased. Gongnan Tian also said helplessly at this time, Young master, the days ahead are still long, and Shaoqun will definitely come to the Hongmeng world in the future. When that time comes, won't it be more convenient for you to do whatever you want in the Hongmeng world? It wasn't easy to persuade Mu Jun. Furthermore, Gongnan Tian promised that he would definitely invite Shaoqun to the Hongmeng world to be his driver in the future. Only then did Mu Jun agree. After confirming that he was leaving, Mu Jun naturally paid a visit to Shaoqing and Bai Ruyue to bid farewell to them. However, after the two elders understood what had happened, their attitude towards Mu Jun changed obviously. How should he put it? It was a little awkward. After all, with the two elders' personalities, it was obvious that they couldn't accept such a thing between two men. Therefore, they were more guarded against Mu Jun. That night, Lin Yuan, Gongnan Tian, and the other three elders told Xianyuan Ling and the others that they were leaving. After knowing that Lin Yuan and the others were leaving, Xin Yuanling, Long Qing, and Song Xing personally went to the cave residence where Gong and Tian and the others were staying. Everyone sat together to drink and chat. It was also considered a farewell for Gong and Tian and the others. "Senior, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Aren't you waiting for third brother to come out of seclusion?" During the banquet, Xin Yuanling tried to persuade them to stay. After all, Xiao Chan was still in seclusion, and there was no way for him to come out. Hearing this, Gong and Tian smiled and said, "It's fine. We've stayed in the Great Thousand World for quite some time, and it's time for us to go back. As for Xiao Chun, just let him know when he comes out of seclusion. In addition, let him come to the Hongmeng world when he has time. After all, we're considered acquaintances." Gong and Tian didn't care about this. It didn't matter whether Xiao Chun was there or not. After all, Gong and Tian knew that Xiao Chun should be in a critical period now. He hadn't come out of seclusion for such a long time, and it was probably because he had obtained the recognition of the origin energy. At this time, it was better not to disturb him. Moreover, it wasn't as if they couldn't meet in the future. After Xiao Chun came out of seclusion and stabilized the situation in the Great Thousand World, he could go to the Hongmeng world. At that time, they would be able to meet again. Hearing Gong Nan Tian's words, Xin Yuanling was helpless. However, he still raised the cup in his hand and said sincerely, "I don't know what to say, but thank you for your kindness in teaching me. In the future, I will definitely visit you in the Hongmeng world." Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 25-20. Xin Yuanling was naturally very respectful to Lin Yuan, Gong and Tian, and the others. After all, without their guidance, Xin Yuanling and the others would not have been able to break through to the Emperor realm. In the face of Xin Yuanling's gratitude, Gong and Tian waved his hand indifferently. "It's a small matter, don't worry about it." Gong and Tian indeed did not care about helping Xin Yuanling and the other sovereigns. Moreover, although those pills were extremely precious in the Great Thousand World and could even be said to be priceless, in the eyes of Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace, they were not too rare. After all, they were not pills for breaking through to the Ancestor Realm. Gong and Tian did not care about these things. After expressing his gratitude, Mu Jun came to Xin Yuanling's side and said reluctantly, "Xin Yuanling, when baby Xiaoqin comes out, you must tell him to find me in the Hongmeng world." Mu Jun was absolutely unwilling to leave the Great Thousand World, but he had no choice. Gong and Tian would definitely not leave him here alone. Looking at Mu Jun's reluctant expression, Xin Yuanling nodded with a strange expression and sighed helplessly in his heart. "Third brother, take care of yourself. This guy probably won't let you go." After the banquet, everyone drank to their heart's content. Only Mu Jun was walking around in a daze. Of course, it was for Xiao Chun. After a silent night, early the next morning, Xin Yuanling and the others personally sent Gong and Tian and the others off. "Xin Yuanling, you must remember to tell Xiao Chun that I will wait for him in the Hongmeng world," Mu Jun reminded again. "Don't worry, I will. Brother Xin Yuan, see you in the future. If there is a chance, you three siblings can come to my world to play," Lin Feng and his sister said. "Of course," Xin Yuanling said with a smile. After bidding farewell to everyone, Gong and Tian and the others left. There was nothing to worry about in the Great Thousand World now. Unless there was a situation where other universes directly intervened, there was no force in the Great Thousand World that could threaten the Sword Sect. Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace would naturally not sit by and do nothing about other universes. Even if Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace did not take action, the Righteous Alliance in the Origin World would probably take action. Moreover, Gong Nantian had paid special attention to Jun Weia last night and discovered that Jun Weia should have no problem breaking through to the Ancestor Realm. It was just a matter of time. Therefore, he was even more relieved. After sending off Gong Nantian and the others, Dao, Ju, Xiao Xiao, and Li Chun also prepared to leave. After all, they had broken through to the Emperor Realm, so it was time for them to return. Moreover, Dao Xiong and Luo Xing were probably waiting anxiously for them. Xin Yuanling and the others didn't say much about the trio's departure. Although Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, and Li Chun had made breakthroughs, and the Saber Sect, Moon Palace, and Heavenly Policy Mansion now had two emperors, they still posed no threat to the Sword Sect. Don't forget that Xin Yuanling and Long Qing were also emperors now, while the Sword Sect already had 4 emperors. Therefore, the biggest winner this time was undoubtedly the Sword Sect. Moreover, in addition to Xin Yuanling and Long Qing, the strength of Song Xing and the others had also improved a lot. Even many of the Sword Sect's disciples had made successive breakthroughs during this period. It could be said that the current Sword Sect was much stronger than before. In this way, even if Dao Ju and the others had broken through to the Emperor realm, not only would they not dare to have any thoughts about the Sword Sect, they would even be more respectful to them. The Sword Sect's strength was truly enough to suppress all the great forces in the Great Thousand World. Moreover, Junwia had not made a breakthrough yet. Once Junwia broke through to the Ancestor realm, the Sword Sect's position as the overlord of the Great Thousand World would be unshakable. Of course, the Sword Sect had not revealed its fangs yet because Shao Chun was still cultivating in the Source Land. Everything would have to wait for Shao Chun to return before making any plans. After sending off Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, and Li Chun, Xin Yuanling and the others returned to the main hall. At this moment, Song Xing's expression changed slightly. Everyone, there's news that Mu Tianshan hasn't been very obedient recently. Mu Tianshan had secretly contacted many great forces. There was no such thing as a wall that didn't have a crack. This news naturally reached the ears of the Sword Sect. Other than the fact that they didn't know about Hermit Mo and the others, the Sword Sect already knew about the other great forces that Mu Tianshan had contacted. They didn't mention it before, but now that Gong Nantian and the others had left, Song Xing felt that it was time to give Mu Tianshan a warning. Hearing Gong Nantian's words, everyone present wasn't too nervous. Everyone didn't think that Mu Tianshan was a threat to the Sword Sect now. Of course, this was under the condition that they didn't know about Hermit Mo and the others. If everyone knew that Mu Tianshan had advanced by leaps and bounds with the help of Hermit Mo and the others, and that Yin Shun had even broken through to the Ancestor realm, they probably wouldn't be so relaxed. Mu Tianshan is indeed acting recklessly. Why don't we use them as a warning to others? Nangongguan was the first to speak. Ever since the battle between the good and evil paths had ended, although all the great forces knew that the Sword Sect had become the overlord of the Great Thousand World, the Sword Sect hadn't deliberately displayed its authority. It wasn't because they didn't want to, but because there were many things that needed to be dealt with after the battle between the good and evil paths had ended. Furthermore, Nangongguan and the other 3 had helped the Sword Sect to increase its strength. Therefore, the Sword Sect didn't have the time to deal with these matters. Naturally, some people who seemed to have submitted to the Sword Sect on the surface were actually dissatisfied with the Sword Sect on the inside. Now, the time was about right. Gong Nantian and the other 3 had left, and the Sword Sect's strength had successfully leaped to a new level. The remaining trivial matters were more or less settled, and they could free up their hands to teach Mu Tianshan a lesson. Therefore, no one objected to Nangongguan's suggestion, but in the end, the decision still depended on Xin Yuanling and Long Qing's opinion. The two of them were Xiao Qian's sworn brother and sister, and their status was extraordinary. Moreover, they had both broken through to the Emperor realm. Xiao Chun and Junwia weren't here, so the two of them were the ones with the highest cultivations in the Sword Sect. Therefore, the final decision was naturally made by the two of them. Facing everyone's gazes, Xin Yuanling and Long Qing looked at each other before Xin Yuanling spoke. Mu Tianshan indeed needs to be dealt with, but how should we control it? Should we teach them a lesson, or should we directly destroy them? That goes without saying. Of course, we're going to destroy them, Zhou Song said immediately. Directly destroying Mu Tianshan was the unanimous opinion of everyone. After all, the Sword Sect didn't have the slightest good impression of Mu Tianshan. Now that they wanted to kill the chicken to warn the monkeys, if they didn't kill the chicken directly, how could it serve as a warning? Therefore, Mu Tianshan had to be destroyed, and they had to do it without holding back. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 25-21. Everyone was discussing Mu Tianshan's matters. Xinyuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and the rest of the sword sect's upper echelons didn't take Mu Tianshan's action seriously. Everyone was discussing Mu Tianshan's matters. Xinyuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and the rest of the sword sect's upper echelons didn't take Mu Tianshan's action seriously. To put it bluntly, in the eyes of the sword sect, Mu Tianshan was like a clown that could be destroyed at any time. Now that many things have been settled, Gongnan Tian, Lin Yuan, and the rest had left one after another. The sword sect could finally free up their hands. Since Mu Tianshan was so happy, the sword sect could only kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Everyone agreed to destroy Mu Tianshan. However, Wu Huan said, "Are there any other Ling Tian sects like Mu Tianshan?" Mu Tianshan was obviously unwilling to submit to the sword sect. That was why he did all these things behind the scenes. He wanted to contact and rope in other forces to oppose the sword sect together. However, other than Mu Tianshan, what about the other Ling Tian sects? Hearing Wu Huan's words, Song Xing shook his head and said, "The other sects didn't make any moves. They didn't express their allegiance, but they were very honest. Currently, only Saber Sect, Heavenly Policy Palace, and Moon Palace expressed their willingness to submit to the Sword Sect. The other Ling Tian sects didn't say anything. However, even if they didn't express their willingness to submit to the Sword Sect, the other Ling Tian sects didn't make any moves behind the scenes. They were all very quiet and honest." Hearing this, Wu Huan didn't say much. It seemed that they only needed to deal with Mu Tianshan. After dealing with Mu Tianshan, the other Ling Tian sects should know what to do. In fact, the sword sect didn't need to make a show of force. This time, Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, and Li Chun all broke through to the Emperor realm. This result already made the other sects jealous. The reason why Dao Ju and the others could break through to the Emperor realm was undoubtedly because of Gong Nantian's help. As for why Gong Nantian and the others chose to help them, it was because of the sword sect. The three great sects had just said that they were willing to submit to the Emperor realm. Sword sect had 3 Emperor realm masters. This could be considered as a report to the 3 great sects. In this regard, many forces were naturally envious. After all, what did a sect with 2 sovereigns represent? It was a qualitative leap. In addition, the sword sect now had 4 emperors. No one knew when Jun Wuya would break through. If he did, the sword sect would be the only sect in the Great Thousand World to have an ancestor realm master. Facing such a behemoth, which Great Thousand World force would dare to openly go against them? In the Great Thousand World, it seemed that no one dared to go against the Great Thousand World. However, was this really the case? Just as the sword sect was discussing the matter of Mu Tianshan, on the other side, Yin Tianyi, Yin Shun, and his son, as well as the higher-ups of Mu Tianshan gathered together in the main hall of Mu Tianshan. They were also discussing how to deal with the sword sect. Mu Tianshan's strength was no longer the same as before. Yin Shun had even broken through to the ancestor realm. As such, Mu Tianshan was naturally full of confidence. He always felt that he could compete with the sword sect. Sitting on a main seat, Yin Shun looked indifferently at the crowd below and said, "Everyone, do you think that we should start a war with the sword sect?" After breaking through to the ancestor realm, Yin Shun had become a little arrogant. Looking at his current appearance, it was obvious that he did not take anyone seriously. It was as if he was the only existence in the entire Great Thousand World. As soon as they received the news that Lin Yuan, Gong Nantian, and the rest had left, Yin Shun and Yin Tianyi could not wait to discuss the matter of starting a war with the sword sect. Upon hearing Yin Shen's words, Yin Tianyi was the first to speak. "Father, I think we should choose to start a war immediately. Now that Jun Wuya has not broken through to the ancestor realm, and Father is already an ancestor realm master, if we start a war with the sword sect now, we will definitely win." Indeed, there was no news of Jun Wuya coming out of seclusion, but Yun Qin's ancestor realm was not the real ancestor realm. Yin Shun and Jun Wuya's situations were completely different. Jun Wuya relied entirely on his own strength to break through to the ancestor realm. Unlike Yun Shun, who was completely at the fake ancestor realm and was even inferior to Xie Tian. However, Yun Shun and Yun Tianyi naturally did not know about this. At this moment, they only felt that dealing with the sword sect was already in the bag. Hearing Yun Tianyi's words, Yun Shun nodded slightly, his eyes filled with confidence. He really did not know where the father and son's confidence came from. Although Yun Tianyi's cultivation was already at the Great Emperor realm, his cultivation was not stable. After all, he did not obtain this strength through his own efforts. Everything was like the moon in the water. Yun Shun agreed to Yun Tianyi's request, and the ancestor realm masters of Mutian Mountain also nodded in agreement. They had also improved a lot with the help of Mo and the other two, and their strength had increased by leaps and bounds. At this moment, all of them were extremely confident. The sword sect had yet to make a move on Mutian Mountain, but Mutian Mountain had already decided to go to war with the sword sect. Seeing that no one objected, Yun Shun said loudly, "In that case, let's go to war with the sword sect." In addition, this king will hold a banquet 3 days later and invite all the great forces to attend to discuss the crusade against the sword sect. After Gongnan Tian, Lin Yuan, and the other two left, Yin Shun thought that he was already the overlord of the Great Thousand World. Moreover, as long as he revealed that he had broken through to the ancestor realm, all the great forces would know what to do. After all, the sword sect did not have an ancestor realm master yet, but his Mutian Mountain already had an ancestor realm master. On this day, there was a terrifying pressure that soared into the sky above Mutian Mountain. This pressure had faintly surpassed the level of an Emperor Realm Master, and it looked extremely frightening. Needless to say, this pressure obviously came from Yin Shun. He wanted to tell the world that he had broken through to the Ancestor Realm and remind them what they should do. The pressure that appeared above Mutian Mountain naturally attracted the attention of many great forces. However, what was even more unexpected was that on that day, Mutian Mountain actually declared war on the sword sect and even listed the various crimes of the sword sect. Of course, these crimes were all nonsense. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. To put it bluntly, it was just looking for an excuse. Not only did he directly declare war on the sword sect, Mutian Mountain also invited all the great forces of the Great Thousand World to gather in Mutian Mountain 3 days later. It was said to be a celebration of Yun Qin's breakthrough to the ancestor realm, but in reality, everyone knew that Mutian Mountain was forcing many great forces to choose a side. Those who would come would obviously be from Mutian Mountain's camp, and those who would not come would be from the sword sect's camp. It could be said that Mutian Mountain's actions this time were extremely high profile. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of this chapter. Chapter 25-22. Mutian Mountain had declared war on the sword sect, and Yun Shun had successfully broken through to the ancestor realm. The entire Great Thousand World was in an uproar when these two pieces of news came out. The war between good and evil had finally ended and peace had been restored. Was it going to be turbulent again? Moreover, how was it possible for Yun Shun to break through to the ancestor realm? Even Jun Wuya had yet to break through to the ancestor realm. So how could Yun Shun break through to the ancestor realm so quickly? However, the terrifying pressure above Mutian Mountain told everyone that Mutian Mountain wasn't lying. Yin Shun had indeed broken through to the ancestor realm. The aftermath of the war between good and evil had yet to completely calm down, and the war between Mutian Mountain and the sword sect was about to erupt again. For a moment, many cultivators in the Great Thousand World felt bitter in their hearts. They couldn't help but sigh. Mutian Mountain's high-profile declaration of war and the banquet he had invited masters from all over the Great Thousand World shocked all the major forces. However, not many forces chose to respond. Most of them chose to watch coldly from the sidelines. After all, the Sword Sect hadn't responded yet. They wanted to see what the Sword Sect's attitude was. After all, if Yinshun had really broken through to the Ancestor Realm and Junwia hadn't, the Sword Sect would be in danger. Although the Sword Sect had more Emperor Realm Masters, it was useless. In front of an Ancestor Realm Master, it was meaningless. The world was waiting for the Sword Sect's response. Whether they would admit defeat or accept the challenge, the Sword Sect's attitude would directly determine the direction of the entire matter. Countless gazes fell on the Sword Sect and Mu Tian Mountain. At this moment, in the main hall of the Sword Sect, Xin Yuanling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and the other higher-ups of the Sword Sect had also gathered. However, this time, everyone's expression was extremely ugly. Mu Tian Mountain is simply courting death. He actually dares to openly declare war. Without further ado, destroy him. Wu Huan's expression was gloomy as he spoke first. Initially, they had already planned to destroy Mu Tianshan. However, before the Sword Sect could make a move, Mu Tianshan had already declared war. Moreover, he had done it in such a high-profile manner. It was as if he didn't care about the Sword Sect at all. What was even worse was that Mu Tianshan was actually holding a banquet 3 days later and inviting the various forces of the Great Thousand World to celebrate Yun Shen's breakthrough. However, even an idiot could tell that Mu Tianshan had an ulterior motive. The banquet 3 days later had nothing to do with Yun Shen's breakthrough. To put it bluntly, the banquet 3 days later was to discuss how to take down the Sword Sect. Everything was for the sake of the Sword Sect. Wu Huan was infuriated. Of course, the others were also filled with murderous intent. Mu Tianshan was indeed courting death. Furthermore, it was obvious that he had planned this beforehand. Gong Nantian and the others had just left, and he had declared war in such a high-profile manner. Who would believe that this wasn't premeditated? However, although they were angry, the people of the Sword Sect were still unsure whether Yinshun had really broken through to the Ancestor State. If Yinshun had really broken through, things would indeed be somewhat troublesome. After all, Junwia hadn't been able to break through to the Ancestor State. Don't be anxious. Yinshen's matter is the key. If Yinshen's breakthrough was just a boast from Mu Tianshan, the Sword Sect would naturally be able to easily destroy Mu Tianshan. However, if Yinshen has really broken through to the Ancestor State, the situation would be different, said Nangongwan. The key problem was still Yinshen. Upon hearing Nangongwan's words, Wu Huan added, he wants to break through to the Ancestor State? Even Master hasn't broken through to the Ancestor State. How can this guy break through? Eldest senior brother, there's no need to think about it. This must be a boast from Mu Tianshan. His goal is to rope in other forces. Wu Huan didn't believe that Yinshen could break through to the Ancestor State. It simply didn't make sense. However, Nangongwan clearly had to be more cautious about this. She turned to look at Song Xing. Song Xing, has there been any news about Mu Tianshan's situation? Mu Tianshan's current situation wasn't very clear. The Sword Sect naturally sent people to investigate immediately. Upon hearing Nangongwan's words, Song Xing nodded slightly and said, the first batch of news has already been sent back. What do you mean? Has Yinshen broken through to the Ancestor State? Zhou Song and the others asked one by one. Whether Yinshen had really broken through or not was very important to the Sword Sect, because if Yinshen's breakthrough was fake, then the Sword Sect could easily crush Mu Tianshan. However, if Yinshen had really broken through to the Ancestor Realm, then the Sword Sect would be in trouble. Faced with everyone's questioning, Song Xing sighed helplessly and then said the result that everyone didn't want to see the most. Although our people weren't able to enter Mu Tianshan, there is indeed a pressure above Mu Tianshan that surpasses the Emperor Realm, as the rumors say. It should be from Yinshen. Based on the current situation, the possibility of Yinshen breaking through to the Ancestor Realm was as high as 80%. Regarding this, everyone's expression changed slightly. They thought to themselves, could it be that Yinshen really broke through to the Ancestor Realm? But it shouldn't be. This guy was only an Emperor Realm Master before. Even the old Ancestor hadn't broken through to the Ancestor Realm, So how did Yun Chun break through? Jun Wuya and Yun Chen's methods of breaking through to the ancestor realm were completely different, so there was naturally no comparison. However, the people of the Sword Sect didn't know about this. Now, all the signs indicated that Yun Chen's breakthrough wasn't a bluff from Mu Tianshan. If that was the case, then this battle would be a little difficult. Although the Sword Sect had the advantage in other aspects, what about Yin Shun? Who would deal with him? Seeing the change in everyone's expression, Song Xing sighed softly and said, "The situation is indeed a little tricky. Unfortunately, the sect master isn't here right now, and we can't contact him. We can only rely on ourselves." Xiaochen was still in the source land, and they couldn't contact him at all. This made Song Xing and the others feel like they were a group of dragons without a leader. They empathized with Song Xing's words. However, at this moment, Xin Yuanling spoke resolutely, "Accept the challenge. No matter what the situation of Mu Tianshan is now, we don't have to care because our sword sect won't admit defeat, let alone retreat. So, we can only accept the challenge." Xin Yuanling directly chose to accept the challenge. There was no need to care about the situation of Mu Tianshan. Even if Yin Chun broke through to the ancestor realm, so what? My sword sect still wants to fight. Hearing Xin Yuanling's words, everyone present was stunned. They then looked at each other and nodded heavily. Xin Yuanling was right. Why bother with the situation of Mu Tianshan? What did Yin Chen's breakthrough have to do with the sword sect? Could it be that if Yin Chun really broke through to the ancestor realm, the sword sect would have to bow down to them? That was obviously impossible. So, no matter what the situation was, no matter what the situation of Mu Tianshan was, the sword sect only had one choice, and that was to accept the challenge and not retreat. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 25-23. Whether Yin Chun broke through or not had nothing to do with the sword sect. Even if Yin Chun really broke through to the ancestor state, would the sword sect be weak? Or would they submit to Mu Tian Mountain? Upon hearing Xin Yuanling's words, everyone nodded. Wu Huan said excitedly, "That's right. Who cares what Yin Chen's situation is now? Let's fight." No one objected to Xin Yuanling's words. They would fight. Seeing this, Xin Yuanling said, "Then let's fight. However, don't be in a hurry to fight. I want to see who will go to Mu Tian Mountain in 3 days." Mu Tian Mountain announced that they would hold a banquet in 3 days to celebrate Yun Chen's breakthrough. Xin Yuanling wanted to see who would go to the Great Thousand World. To put it bluntly, the banquet that would be held 3 days later would be a time for them to choose between Swords Gate and Mu Tian Mountain. It would be a time for them to make a decision. If they chose to go to the banquet, they would undoubtedly choose Mu Tian Mountain. If they did not go, they would choose to stand on the sword sect side. They could make use of Mu Tian Mountain's opportunity to take over the Great Thousand World and establish the sword sect's position as the overlord. The outcome would depend on this battle. Xin Yuanling and the rest made their decision. Soon, the sword sect responded strongly to Mu Tian Mountain's declaration of war. If they wanted to fight, they would fight. They had no intention of backing down. Even if Yun Chun had broken through to the ancestor state, the sword sect was still so strong. They did not give Mu Tian Mountain any face and did not leave any way out for themselves. The sword sect's response was firm. Following the sword sect's response, the various forces in the Great Thousand World knew that the rare peace was about to be broken. This time, they were betting on the battle for the throne of the Great Thousand World. Regardless of whether it was the sword sect or Mu Tian Mountain, whoever won would become the true overlord of the Great Thousand World. However, Mu Tianshan probably didn't expect that they had already lost the battle right from the start. Because regardless of whether they won or lost, Mu Tianshan's fate was already sealed. He was definitely going to die. The two superpowers wanted to fight for the position of the overlord of the vast thousand domains. At the same time, they did not seem to want to fight alone. Instead, they wanted to force the other superpowers to choose a side before the battle began. On one hand, it was because Mu Tian Mountain was holding a banquet 3 days later. On the other hand, It was because the Sword Sect had no intention of participating. The Sword Sect didn't make a move immediately. Everyone knew that the Sword Sect wanted to see which powers would return to Mount Mu's banquet. Needless to say, those powers that chose to participate would become the Sword Sect's enemies. Once the Sword Sect won, their fates would be predictable. It was the same for those who chose the Sword's Gate. If Mutian Mountain won in the end, they would have no way out either. However, what was shocking was that after the Sword Sect responded, the Saber Sect, Moon Palace, and Heavenly Policy Palace also expressed their willingness to listen to the Sword Sect's orders. These three superpowers didn't choose to remain silent. Instead, they stood firmly on the side of the Sword Sect. In the face of these three superpowers, there was probably no superpower in the vast thousand domains that dared to ignore them. After all, the situation in the vast thousand domains had changed drastically. The Sword Sect and Mutian Mountain had both risen against the heavens. However, the strength of the Saber Sect, Moon Palace, and Heavenly Policy Palace could not be underestimated. In addition, this time, Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, and Li Chun had broken through to the Emperor realm. These three superpowers had two emperors. In front of such strength, no superpower dared to ignore them. The voices of the Saber Sect, Moon Palace, and Heavenly Policy Palace made the atmosphere extremely tense because Mutian Mountain still didn't have the slightest intention of backing down. In an instant, the entire vast thousand domains was once again shrouded in fighting spirit. It was really an eventful period. The war between the good and evil paths had just ended, and the rare period of peace was gone in the blink of an eye. In an instant, the vast thousand domains was about to welcome another war, a war that would determine the direction of the vast thousand domains. The Sword Sect was already prepared for war. However, Xin Yuanling and the other higher-ups of the Sword Sect had been waiting for the banquet that would be held in 3 days. At this moment, in Xin Yuanling's residence, everyone was gathered together and chatting while drinking tea. How many people do you think will attend the banquet at Mutian Mountain? Wu Huan asked. Hearing this, Song Xing said calmly, there should be some people. There will definitely be people who will go, and there will be quite a few of them. After all, many people are best at taking advantage of the situation. Now that Yun Shun has broken through to the ancestor state, many people think that the Sword Sect has no chance of winning, Xin Yuanling said with a smile. On the surface, Mutian Mountain did have a higher chance of winning. After all, Yin Shun had broken through to the ancestor state, and Mutian Mountain didn't seem to be able to deal with Yin Shun alone. If they couldn't deal with Yin Shun, the Sword Sect would definitely lose this battle. Therefore, many people thought more highly of Mutian Mountain. In this way, the banquet at Mutian Mountain would probably be very lively. However, it didn't matter. Xin Yuanling just wanted to see who exactly chose Mutian Mountain so that he could settle the score 1-by-1 in the future. As for the outcome of the battle, Xin Yuanling could only say that he would do his best. No matter what, they had a fight. Even if the Sword Sect chose to submit, would Mutian Mountain let the Sword Sect off? It was obviously impossible. From the moment Mutian Mountain declared war, only one of the Sword Sect and Mutian Mountain could survive. Everyone knew that a mountain couldn't accommodate 2 tigers. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Mutian Mountain became lively. Just as Xin Yuanling had guessed, there were indeed many forces that chose Mutian Mountain. These people felt that the Sword Sect couldn't do anything to Yun Shun since he had broken through to the ancestor state. They were certain that the Sword Sect would lose, so they directly threw themselves into Mutian Mountain's arms. Since early in the morning, people had arrived one after another. These people were from the various major forces in the Great Thousand World. Of course, there were also many powerful people who were independent cultivators. As the sect leader of Mutian Mountain, Yun Tianyi also put on a show and personally welcomed them. Seeing that so many people had chosen Mutian Mountain, the smile on Yun Tianyi's face became even wider. Looking at the lively Mutian Mountain, Yun Tianyi was secretly delighted. Xiao Chun, oh Xiao Chun, what do you have to fight with me now? See, so many people don't think that the Sword Sect will win this time. Mu Tian Mountain will definitely win this time. When the time comes, I will personally kill you. The change in the situation made Yun Tianyi extremely confident and excited. It was as if he could already see the moment of victory. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 25-24. More people came to attend the banquet than he had imagined, which made Yun Tianyi very happy. Sensing the extraordinarily lively atmosphere of the entire Mu Tian Mountain, Yun Tianyi felt as though he had succeeded, and the Mu Tian Mountain was already the overlord of the Great Thousand World. Sect Master Yun, congratulations on breaking through to the Ancestor Realm. Sect Master Yun, Mu Tian Mountain will definitely be the leader of the Great Thousand World in the future. Once again, we congratulate you in advance. Everyone who came to attend the banquet congratulated Yun Tianyi with a smile, and Yun Tianyi responded with a smile. Haha, with everyone's support, Mu Tian Mountain will naturally not disappoint everyone. We will definitely enjoy glory and wealth together in the future. Yun Tianyi was indeed a little proud. After all, Mu Tian Mountain had never been like this before. It was as if all the major forces in the Great Thousand World had come to curry favor with Mu Tian Mountain, which made Yun Tianyi feel very comfortable. At noon, almost everyone who came to attend the banquet had arrived. Yun Tianyi then went to Yun Chen's residence and saw Yun Chen drinking tea in the courtyard. Seeing Yun Tianyi walk over, Yun Chen smiled and said, "How is it? Master, it's better than we thought. It seems that the sword sect is indeed powerless to reverse the situation," Yun Tianyi said with a smile. Needless to say, Yun Tianyi was indeed full of confidence at this moment. However, Yun Shan was more cautious and did not rejoice because of Yun Tianyi's words. Instead, he said calmly, "Tianyi, don't be complacent at any time. At least before everything is settled, no one can tell what the outcome will be." Yun Tianyi softly reprimanded Yun Tianyi. Yun Tianyi nodded his head in response. Seeing this, Yun Shan also stood up and said, "Let's go. Since he has chosen my Mu Tian Mountain, I cannot be too rude." The banquet was held directly in the main hall of Mu Tian Mountain. At this moment, there was already a hubbub of voices. Many experts who came to attend the banquet were drinking and chatting. After weighing the pros and cons, they had all chosen Mu Tian Mountain. On a certain level, they would be in the same camp in the future. Therefore, the distance between everyone was much closer. As the banquet continued, the atmosphere became more and more intense. At this moment, Yun Shun and Yun Tianyi finally appeared. Seeing Yun Shun personally appeared, everyone present was extremely excited. Why did they choose to join Mu Tian Mountain? Wasn't it all for Yun Shun? Because Yun Shun had broken through to the Ancestor Realm, they had chosen Mu Tian Mountain over the Sword Sect and not the Sword Sect. Therefore, Yun Shin's appearance had undoubtedly given everyone a boost of confidence and made them even more confident. Moreover, in order to achieve a better result, not only did Yun Shun not conceal his aura, he even intentionally revealed his strength. An aura that faintly surpassed the Emperor Realm was faintly discernible, enveloping the entire Mu Tian Mountain. Feeling this aura, the hearts of everyone present calmed down. As expected, Yun Shun really has broken through into the Progenitor Realm. In this way, their choice was correct because the Sword Sect still didn't have a Progenitor Realm expert. No one knew how Yun Shun had broken through to the Ancestor Realm. After all, Junwei hadn't broken through yet. However, regardless of how Yun Shun had done it, it was a fact that he was now an Ancestor Realm expert. No one could refute that. With a faint smile on his face, Yun Shun came to the main seat and took a seat. Then, he swept his gaze across everyone present and said indifferently, "This king thanks everyone for coming. Today, we won't talk about anything else but romance. Moreover, since everyone has chosen my Mu Tian Mountain, this king can also promise everyone that my Mu Tian Mountain will definitely enjoy glory and splendor with everyone present in the future." Yun Shen's words caused the atmosphere to reach its peak. This was Yun Shen's promise, and what everyone present wanted was this sentence from Yun Shen. Immediately, Everyone raised the wine cup in their hands and congratulated Yun Chun in unison. Old ancestor Yun is mighty. Facing the congratulations and praise of so many people, even Yun Chun couldn't help but feel a little lightheaded. However, Yin Chun was ultimately much calmer than Yin Tianyi. Therefore, although he felt comfortable in his heart, he didn't show it on the surface. He remained calm and indifferent as he raised his wine cup and said to everyone, "Come, everyone, let's drink up." With that, Yin Chun took the initiative to drink all the wine in his cup. Seeing this, the others naturally didn't want to fall behind. In an instant, the atmosphere of the banquet was completely heated up. Naturally, the situation at Mu Tian Mountain couldn't be hidden from the Sword Sect. They knew that many forces had sided with Mu Tian Mountain. At the same time, the Sword Sect was also very lively. This was because today was also the day of the Sword Sect's banquet. It was set on the same day as Mu Tian Mountain, and there were also many forces present. However, compared to Mu Tian Mountain, there were fewer forces present. Currently, the entire Great Thousand World was divided into 3 factions. One faction supported Mu Tian Mountain, one faction supported the Sword Sect, and one faction remained neutral. The Sword Sect had chosen to hold the banquet on the same day as Mu Tian Mountain. The meaning behind this was self-evident. The Saber Sect, Moon Palace, and Heavenly Policy Mansion were naturally present. Moreover, Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, and Luo Xing were present personally. At this moment, the main hall of the Sword Sect was also very lively. However, at the main table, although Dao Xiong and the others were drinking heartily, they were privately discussing the upcoming battle. After drinking a cup of wine, Dao Xiong looked at Song Xing and asked, "Song Xing, is there still no news of Xiao Chun?" There's a trace of worry between his brows. The Saber Sect, Heavenly Policy Mansion, and Moon Palace were obviously completely tied to the Sword Sect. Both parties were basically in the same boat. Hearing Dao Xiong's words, Song Xing shook his head and said, "The sect leader is in seclusion, and there is no news until now." Xiao Chun came from the land of origin. Even if Song Xing wanted to contact him, he could not. Dao Xiong muttered to himself, "This is a little troublesome." He was actually not confident. After all, Yin Chun had broken through to the ancestor state. Not only Song Xing, but the others present were also extremely worried. This was because everyone knew that no one in the Sword Sect could stop Yin Chun. Once no one could stop Yin Chun, regardless of the process, Mu Tian Mountain would definitely win in the end. There was no doubt about that. Many people were still discussing softly and expressed their worries about the future of the Sword Sect. However, in this somewhat strange atmosphere, a space crack appeared in the middle of the main hall. Then, Xiao Chun, who was dressed in white, slowly walked out. Looking at the crowded main hall, Xiao Chun said with a smile, "What day is it today? Why is my Sword Sect so lively? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 25. Xiao Chen's sudden appearance stunned everyone present. Previously, everyone was still saying that there was no news of Xiao Chun. Who would have thought that Xiao Chun would appear in the next second? Long Qing and Xin Yuanling were the first to regain their senses. They looked at Xiao Chun in surprise. Long Qing said in surprise, "Little brother, you've come out of seclusion?" Previously, they had tried to contact Xiao Chun, but there had been no response. Now that they saw Xiao Chun, Long Qing and Xin Yuanling were naturally very excited. Hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chun smiled and nodded. Yes. Then, Xiao Chun was led to the main table by everyone. When they saw Xiao Chun again, even Dao Xiong and Li Xiao could not see through Xiao Chen's cultivation. After a few months, even Dao Xiong and the others could not sense Xiao Chen's cultivation. This made everyone secretly shocked. They thought to themselves, perhaps Xiao Chen's cultivation has increased by a lot again? Everyone bowed. Xiao Chen's return was like a shot of adrenaline to everyone, making them feel much more at ease. This was especially so for those who had chosen the Sword Sect. Previously, they were not optimistic about the Sword Sect. However, Xiao Chen's appearance seemed to have given them confidence. After taking a seat, Xiao Chun smiled and said to Dao Xiong and the other two, "Thank you, three seniors." Xiao Chun had also heard about the matters in the Great Thousand World. He knew that Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, and Luo Xing had helped him a lot and had always stood firmly on the side of the sword sect. This made Xiao Chun feel very gratified. In the face of Xiao Chen's gratitude, Dao Xiong took the lead and said, "This is nothing. We are in the same boat. You can't expect us to join Mu Tian Mountain." Dao Xiong's words were still the same as before. He did not care about anything at all. In response, Xiao Chun smiled and did not say much. Xiao Chun already understood the situation in the Great Thousand World. He originally thought that with the sword sect's current strength, no one would dare to jump out and seek death. However, he did not expect Mu Tianshan to actually jump out and do it in such a high-profile manner. Mu Tian Mountain's patriarch Yun Chun had broken through to the ancestor realm. This was probably the source of Mu Tian Mountain's confidence. However, this confidence was no different from a joke in Xiao Chen's eyes. How could it be so easy to break through to the ancestor realm? Even Jun Wuya had yet to break through to the ancestor realm. Was it even possible for Yun Chun to break through to the ancestor realm? He must have used some kind of shameful method to forcefully increase his cultivation. Just like Xie Tian in the past, he seemed to have an ancestor realm cultivation, but his strength was incomparably weak. Compared to a true ancestor realm expert, there was no comparison at all. Xiao Chan did not pay much attention to Mu Tianshan. In Xiao Chen's eyes, Mu Tianshan was just a bunch of clowns. However, the others did not think so. Previously, they were still talking about Yin Chun breaking through to the ancestor realm. Now that Xiao Chun had returned, everyone naturally regarded him as their backbone. Therefore, Song Xing also spoke up. "Sectmaster, Yin Chun has broken through to the ancestor realm. Now, the person that the sword sect was most worried about was Yin Chun. After all, Yin Chun had broken through to the ancestor realm. Moreover, according to various intelligence reports, it did not seem to be fake." However, before Song Xing could finish speaking, Xiao Chun interrupted him. With a faint smile on his face, Xiao Chun said indifferently, "What bullshit ancestor realm? Is Yin Chun worthy of breaking through to the ancestor realm? Even Master has not broken through to the ancestor realm. So how can he? He probably used some kind of shameful method to break through, but he's only at the pseudo-ancestor realm." Xiao Chun did not take Yin Chun seriously at all. Breaking through to the ancestor realm like this was no different from trash. Seeing that Xiao Chun was full of confidence, everyone in the hall was also full of confidence. Since Xiao Chun said that there would be no problem, they naturally believed him. A mere pseudo-ancestor realm was not worth mentioning. As soon as his voice fell, Xiao Chun looked at the people at the same table as him and said with a smile, "Don't worry, leave Yin Chun to me. I like to see how strong he is as an ancestor realm expert." There is no need to alarm Jun Wuya at all. Currently, Jun Wuya should be at the critical moment of breaking through to the ancestor realm. It was obviously impossible for him to come out of seclusion at this time. Moreover, Xiao Chun was confident that he could defeat Yin Chun. Upon hearing Xiao Chun's words, everyone looked at each other. Then, Dao Xiong asked curiously, "Xiao Chun, tell us honestly, what is your current cultivation level?" No one could see through Xiao Chun's cultivation level at all. Faced with Dao Xiong's question, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "You will know when the time comes." He was keeping them in suspense and did not answer Dao Xiong's question directly. However, as soon as he said that, Xiao Chun took the initiative to raise his cup and say to everyone present, "Thank you for supporting the sword sect today. The sword sect will definitely not disappoint you. You only need to watch the battle with Mu Tian Mountain from the side. I believe that the sword sect will not disappoint you when the time comes." As soon as Xiao Chun said that, everyone present was stunned. What did that mean? The sword sect did not need them to take action. They wanted to fight against Mu Tian Mountain and the other forces by themselves? In fact, Mu Tian Mountain and the sword sect were now divided into two camps. When the battle started, everyone should take action. However, now, Xiao Chun did not need them to take action. He only needed the sword sect's power. It had to be said that Xiao Qin's words were indeed arrogant. However, that was also Xiao Qin's true thoughts. Rather than asking everyone present to take part in the battle, it was better for them to watch from the side and see how the sword sect defeated the forces of Mutian Mountain in one fell swoop. Since the sword sect wanted to become the overlord of the Great Thousand World, they had to show that they had the power to suppress everything. Otherwise, there would be many incidents like what happened to Mutian Mountain in the future. Xiao Chun wanted to make a name for the sword sect in one battle, so that the various forces in the Great Thousand World would not dare to provoke the sword sect. At the same time, he wanted to tell everyone that the sword sect's power was enough to fight against the entire Great Thousand World. Even if all the forces combined, they would not be a match for the sword sect. He wanted to make those with ulterior motives fearful. Only then would he be able to control the Great Thousand World in the shortest time possible. Xiao Chen obviously did not have the time and energy to play with these people slowly. Hence, he chose the most direct method. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen did not care about everyone's shock. He took the lead and drank all the wine in his cup. Everyone come, let's drink up. After drinking a cup of wine, Dao Ju looked at Xiao Chen in confusion. Xiao Chen, are you really going to fight against Mutian Mountain alone? You don't need us to take action? They're just a bunch of useless people. Why do we have to make it so troublesome? We will just destroy Mutian Mountain tomorrow. Upon hearing that, Xiao Chen smiled. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Peak. Chapter 25-26. From Xiao Chen's point of view, Mutian Mountain was just a bunch of clowns. As for Yin Chun, breaking through to the Ancestor Realm was bullshit. Xiao Chun didn't care at all. If Yin Chun had broken through to the Ancestor Realm with his own strength, then Xiao Chun might think more highly of him, but obviously, Yin Chun didn't rely on his own strength to break through to the Ancestor Realm, so Xiao Chun naturally didn't care. Xiao Chun did not care about a person who gained power through shady means. He did not value such a person at all. To put it bluntly, Xiao Chun didn't put Yin Chun in his eyes at all. With his current strength, Xiao Chun didn't care about Yin Chun at all. Seeing that Xiao Chun didn't seem to care at all and even said that he would destroy Mutian Mountain tomorrow, everyone present was stunned for a moment, but they soon cheered loudly. No matter what, Xiao Chun was confident, which was good news for everyone present. After all, they were all people who had joined the sword sect. Since the sword sect was strong, they naturally felt proud of it. What's more, Xiao Chun didn't have any intention of letting them fight. He wanted to rely on the sword sect's own strength to deal with this battle, which made everyone feel even more relieved. Not having to fight meant that there wouldn't be any casualties. Compared to the others, Dao Xiong, Luo Xing, and Li Xiao were deep in thought. Luo Xing even said with some worry, Xiao Chun, why don't we go together tomorrow? Mutian Mountain's strength couldn't be underestimated. Many forces had chosen to join Mutian Mountain. Star-Lord was worried that the Sword Sect wouldn't be able to do it alone. With the help of Saber Sect, Moon Palace, and Heavenly Policy Palace, their chances of winning would naturally be higher. Don't forget that Saber Sect and Moon Palace had two emperors. Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, and Li Chun were all emperors. However, when he heard Luo Xing's words, Xiao Chun shook his head and refused without hesitation. No need. The three of you can stay in the Cloud Palace tomorrow. Xiao Chun had been relaxed and confident since the beginning. Luo Xing did not say anything about this. Based on their understanding of Xiao Chun should not be an arrogant person. Since Xiao Chun did not even care about Mutian Mountain, that meant that Xiao Chun was confident of winning. As for Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and the other higher-ups of the Sword Sect, they didn't say anything. All they needed to do was listen to Xiao Chen's orders. Whatever Xiao Chen said, they would do. The atmosphere of the banquet was very relaxed, especially after Xiao Chen's appearance. Everyone felt more at ease, and some of their previous nervousness quickly dissipated. Xiao Chen only returned to his home late into the night. Qin Shiru and the other women were also very happy that Xiao Chen had come out of seclusion. However, when they heard that Xiao Chen would be going to Mutian Mountain to fight tomorrow, they couldn't help but feel worried. "Husband, will you be fine tomorrow?" Qinshu asked worriedly as they sat together. "Don't worry, it's just a small matter. They're just a bunch of clowns," Xiaochen replied with a smile. "But we heard that Yunshun has already broken through to the ancestor realm. Will he?" The women were also worried about Yunshun. Yunshun breaking through to the ancestor realm was what worried them the most. However, Xiaochen sneered in response. "Is he worthy of being called an ancestor realm cultivator? He's not worthy. Don't worry, I'll be back tomorrow. Nothing will happen." Xiaochen was sure that Yunshun had obtained the ancestor realm through dishonorable means. Otherwise, why didn't he receive any divine punishment? It should be known that it was impossible to hide the divine punishment of the ancestor realm. If Yunshun had really broken through to the ancestor realm, the divine punishment would have been felt by all the cultivators in the vast thousand domains. However, Yunshun's breakthrough didn't cause the divine punishment to descend. What did this mean? It meant that even the laws of heaven and earth didn't recognize Yunshun's ancestor realm cultivation. How could he go against the sword sect? He signaled Qin Shiru and the other women not to worry. Yunshun and Mu Tian Mountain weren't enough to threaten him. Seeing that Xiaochen was so relaxed, the other women didn't say anything else and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After a silent night, Xiaochen stopped cultivating the next morning. At the same time, many powerful people from the sword sect had gathered in the main square of the sword sect. From a most ordinary disciples to Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and the other higher-ups of the sword sect, they were all present. Today was the day that the sword sect and Mu Tian Mountain would fight. Xiaochen finally appeared in the square as everyone waited. He stood in the air and looked at the many disciples of the sword sect below. Xiaochen said indifferently, "There is only one goal in this battle, and that is to destroy Mu Tian Mountain. At the same time, it is also a battle to establish the might of the sword sect. Therefore, I hope that everyone can fight beautifully." Xiaochen had never considered the outcome of the battle because to him, they would definitely win the battle. It was just a matter of how well they would win. Xiaochen hoped that the sword sect would be able to destroy Mu Tian Mountain in an unstoppable manner. Following Xiaochen's words, the entire Mu Tian Mountain's morale instantly soared, and their fighting spirits soared to the heavens. Feeling the soaring fighting spirit of the entire sword sect, the powerful people from the various factions who were still in the sword sect sighed in their hearts. The sword sect was indeed powerful now. Just the disciples of the sword sect alone would be a rare genius in their own sections. This was the so-called natural selection. The strong would become stronger while the weak would become weaker. This was because many geniuses like to choose a powerful faction. They would rather be an ordinary disciple in a powerful faction than be a tyrant in a small faction. This was what people often said. It was better to be the tail of a phoenix than the head of a chicken. The fighting spirit of the sword sect's disciples was completely ignited by Xiaochen. Seeing this, Xiaochen nodded slightly and then shouted, "Let's go." Following Xiaochen's command, the disciples all soared into the sky and flew towards East Sword City. Everyone wanted to use the teleportation array in East Sword City to head to Mu Tian Mountain. After watching the disciples leave, Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, and the other higher-ups of the sword sect surrounded Xiaochen. "Third brother, how do you plan to fight this battle?" Xianyuan Ling asked as he looked at Xiaochen. Hearing this, Xiaochen only smiled and said, "Leave Yunshun to me. You guys settle the rest." Xiaochen did not have any plan for this battle. He was just reckless. Anyway, his strength completely crushed Mu Tian Mountain. The biggest problem was only Yunshun. Xiaochen had absolute confidence that he could kill Yunshun with his sword. Hearing Xiaochen's words, everyone was helpless. Did Xiaochen really look down on Mu Tian Mountain so much? One had to know that Mu Tian Mountain's actions this time made them a little nervous. "All right, let's go. Relax, this battle won't be too difficult," Xiaochen said with a smile. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 25-27. Xiao Chun did not pay much attention to the battle. When they heard Xiao Chen's words, Xin Yuanling and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. Xiao Chen's confidence had naturally affected them. Furthermore, Xiao Chun had also said that they could leave Yun Chun to him. Xiao Chun did not pay much attention to the battle. When they heard Xiao Chen's words, Xin Yuanling and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. Xiao Chen's confidence had naturally affected them. Furthermore, Xiao Chun had also said that they could leave Yun Chun to him. Since Xiao Chun dared to say so, Xiao Chen's character meant that he was not afraid of Yun Chun. Xiao Chun and the rest left the sword sect and headed straight for Mu Tian Mountain under the escort of the experts from the various major forces. The sword sect had made such a big move, and Xiao Chun had no intention of hiding it. Hence, Mu Tian Mountain was the first to know about it. After the banquet last night, Mu Tian Mountain regained its peace. However, early in the morning, Yun Chun, Yun Tianyi, and his son, as well as the higher-ups of Mu Tian Mountain, gathered in the main hall of Mu Tian Mountain. All of them did not look too good and were obviously not as radiant as they were last night. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. Xiao Qin's reputation in the Great Thousand World was such that even the older generation of emperors like Yun Chun did not dare to underestimate him. Now that Xiao Chun had come out of seclusion, the first thing he did was to attack Mu Tian Mountain. This naturally made the people of Mu Tian Mountain nervous. A sword sect without Xiao Chun and a sword sect with Xiao Chun were two completely different things. The pressure that Xiao Chun exerted on Mu Tian Mountain was something that no one could replace. As long as Xiao Chun was around, it was impossible for the people to not be nervous. Looking at the solemn faces of the people present, Yun Chun, who was sitting on the main seat, said, "Why? Are all of you scared out of your wits by Xiao Chun?" Being afraid before the battle was definitely a military taboo. Both sides had not really started the battle, but the people on their side were already afraid. In that case, how were they going to fight? They were naturally inferior to the other party. Hearing Yin Chen's words, the people present did not respond. Seeing this, a look of helplessness flashed across Yun Chen's eyes. Xiao Chen's fierce reputation. Xiao had proven himself throughout the journey and was known as a legend. Along the way, he had proven himself. He was a lot of people's expectations. However, now that Mu Tianshan was completely at odds with Swords Gate, there was no way he would back down. Swords Gate wouldn't give Mu Tianshan such an opportunity either. Therefore, a battle was unavoidable. In order to ease the tension in everyone's heart, the best way was naturally for Yun Chun to defeat Xiao Chun. As long as Xiao Chen's undefeated legend could be broken, then the situation would change greatly. No matter how much he said, it was better to defeat Xiao Chun in front of everyone. It would be more convincing. Thinking of this, Yun Chun did not say anything else. Since the battle with the sword sect was inevitable, he could only fight. Although Xiao Chun was fierce, he was only an Emperor Realm Master after all. On the other hand, Yun Chun was an Ancestor Realm Master. Naturally, he was not afraid of Xiao Chun. Thinking of this, Yun Chen's confidence increased greatly. He stood up and said loudly, "Everyone prepare yourselves. This battle is inevitable. It is also the battle for the rise of my Mu Tian Mountain. If we win, my Mu Tian Mountain will be the true overlord of the Great Thousand World. As for Xiao Chun, this king will personally take care of him." Xiao Chun wanted Yun Chun to personally take action because the key to this battle was Xiao Chun. As long as he could defeat Xiao Chun, everything would be settled. As for Yun Tianyi, although he had also broken through to the Emperor realm, Yun Chun was still worried. Or rather, Yun Chun did not think that Yun Tianyi could defeat Xiao Chun. There were some things that even as a father, Yun Chun had to admit. Xiao Chun was indeed much more outstanding than Yun Tianyi. When Yun Chun said this, the higher-ups of Mu Tian Mountain heaved a sigh of relief, especially when they felt the strong confidence exuding from Yun Chun. Everyone felt even more confident. As Yun Chen's voice fell, everyone in Mu Tian Mountain quickly prepared for battle. At the same time, the various great forces that had sided with Mu Tian Mountain also made their preparations. Unlike the sword sect, Shao Chun did not let the forces that supported the sword sect take action. Even the three great Ling Tian sects, Saber Sect, Moon Palace, and Heavenly Policy Palace, were not allowed by Shao Chun. Mu Tian Mountain wanted to gather all their forces to defeat the sword sect in one fell swoop. However, from the choice of the two, it could be seen that compared to the sword sect, Mu Tian Mountain was obviously more nervous. Although Yun Shun tried his best to appear confident, it could still be seen that Yun Shun could not help but be nervous in his heart. The sword sect gave off a feeling of confidence from the beginning to the end, as if they did not put Mu Tian Mountain in their eyes. As for Mu Tian Mountain, although he looked confident on the surface, deep down, there was still deep worry. The battle preparations were done, and they were only waiting for the sword sect to arrive. At Yun Shin's residence, Yun Shun, who was waiting for the sword sect to arrive, looked calm on the surface, but he was actually a little nervous in his heart. "Father, Shao Chun." Sitting beside Yin Shun, Yin Tianyi whispered. Yin Tianyi didn't know if Yin Shun was a match for Shao Chun, but before he finished his sentence, Yin Shun interrupted. "Why? Do you think I'm not a match for Shao Chun?" Unknowingly, Shao Chun had given off a strong sense of oppression to the older generation of venerable sovereigns. He was clearly a junior, but unknowingly, when Yin Shun heard the two words Shao Chun, the corners of his eyes couldn't help but twitch. It wasn't obvious during normal times, but once you became enemies with the sword sect and Shao Chun, you could clearly feel it. Logically speaking, Yin Shun had broken through to the ancestor realm and shouldn't be afraid of Shao Chun at all. But for some unknown reason, after hearing that Shao Chun had come out of seclusion, Yin Shun couldn't help but feel nervous. However, Yin Shun definitely wouldn't show it, because once Yin Shun cowered, there would be no way for him to fight this battle, and it would be a crushing defeat. Yin Shun glanced at Yin Tianyi with an ugly expression and didn't say anything else as he quietly waited for Shao Chun's arrival. Compared to the slightly tense points on Mount Mu Tian's side, Shao Chun's side was much more relaxed. Along the way to Mount Mu Tian, the disciples of the sword sect were majestic. Everyone was filled with battle intent and didn't seem to be afraid at all. Together with Xinyuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and the others, Shao Chun leisurely rushed to Mount Mu Tian. The speed of the main group was naturally much slower, but Shao Chun didn't seem to be in a hurry. Moreover, to everyone's surprise, Qin Shu and the other girls, as well as Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao, actually came along for this battle. Shao Chun actually didn't reject them. Looking at the two boys beside Qin Shu and the other girls, Xinyuan Ling said somewhat helplessly, "Third brother, swords have no eyes. How could you let these two boys come along? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 25-28. Xinyuan Ling was worried about the safety of Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao. This time, they were not going on a sightseeing tour. They were going to battle Mu Tian Mountain. Shao Chun had actually brought the two of them along. Xinyuan Ling was worried about the safety of Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao. This time, they were not going on a sightseeing tour. They were going to battle Mu Tian Mountain. Shao Chun had actually brought the two of them along. In the face of Xinyuan Ling's worries, Shao Chun did not mind at all. He smiled and said, "Since the two of them insisted on coming along, there's no harm in letting them take a look. After all, they will have to come into contact with each other sooner or later. As Shao Chen's sons, they would definitely not be able to avoid such matters in the future." In Shao Chen's opinion, it was not a bad thing to let them come into contact with such situations earlier. Hearing this, Xinyuan Ling said helplessly, "Sai, aren't you afraid of any danger?" Xinyuan Ling was a little helpless. Shao Chun did not take this battle seriously from the beginning to the end. Xinyuan Ling knew that, but he did not expect Shao Chun to be so relaxed. Shao Chun did not look like he was going to war. He was clearly going on a sightseeing tour, and he even brought his family along. Knowing what Xinyuan Ling was worried about, Shao Chun smiled and comforted him. "Don't worry, big brother. We will definitely win this battle. You will know when the time comes. There's no need to be so nervous." How could he not be nervous? Hearing this, Xin Yuan Ling complained in his heart. The strength of Mu Tian Mountain was obvious to all, especially Yunshun. Furthermore, this battle concerned the sword sect's position as the overlord of the Great Thousand World in the future. How could Xin Yuan Ling not take it seriously? One must know that there could not be any accidents in this battle. Since they were already here, there was no point for Xin Yuan Ling to worry. Furthermore, since Xiao Chun was so confident, Xin Yuan Ling was slightly relieved. After 3 days, the people from the sword sect finally arrived at Mu Tian Mountain. Along the way, Mu Tian Mountain did not send anyone to stop them. Evidently, they wanted to settle this battle with the sword sect. The sky above where Mu Tian Mountain was already filled with the strong cultivators of Mu Tian Mountain. Everyone waited quietly. Not long after, black figures appeared in the sky. These were the strong cultivators of Sword's Gate. The sword sect had finally arrived, and the battle was about to start. Sword sect's disciples, sword, and many powerful sword sect's people, Xiao, and other, and the. Take good care of these two. Xiao Chun instructed Qin Shiru and the other ladies. He then appeared at the front. He was still dressed in white. With Xiao Chen's appearance, the atmosphere instantly became extremely tense, especially on Mu Tianshan's side. Everyone's eyes fell on Xiao Chun, and there was a tinge of fear in their eyes. They had no choice. The young man in front of them was the most outstanding person in the Great Thousand World. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was a legend in the Great Thousand World. Facing Xiao Chun as an enemy, no one could remain calm. Xiao Chun used to be their pride and hope. However, to the warriors in Mu Tian Mountain's camp, Xiao Chun was like a huge mountain that was pressing down on their heads. They felt suffocated. It was an uncomfortable feeling. Some people even retreated unconsciously. However, Xiao Chun was extremely relaxed. Xiao Chun scanned the crowd and said, "Yin Shun, why aren't you showing yourself? Are you going to be a coward now?" Xiao Chun's voice was not loud, but it was clearly heard by everyone. As soon as Xiao Chun finished speaking, Yun Shun and Yun Tianyi finally appeared in front of him. The three of them stood facing each other. Looking at the relaxed Xiao Chun in front of him, Yun Tianyi's face darkened. Xiao Chun. Yun Tianyi had never been convinced by Xiao Chun. Otherwise, he would not have chosen to go against the sword sect. In front of Xiao Chun, Yun Tianyi instinctively wanted to show off. He wanted to tell the world that he was not inferior to Xiao Chun. However, Xiao Chun was not interested in Yun Tianyi's wishful thinking. Although he could tell at a glance that Yun Tianyi was an Emperor Realm Master, his aura was weak. Xiao Chun could tell at a glance that Yun Tianyi had probably used some underhanded means to break through to the Emperor Realm. Xiao Chun was not interested in dealing with such a person. Therefore, before Yun Tianyi could finish speaking, Xiao Chun interrupted him. "Get lost. Yun Tianyi was not worthy of his attention. Even his father Yun Shun was not worthy of Xiao Chun's attention, let alone Yun Tianyi. Yun Tianyi might seem to be an Emperor Realm Master now, but as long as Xiao Chun wanted to, he could definitely kill Yun Tianyi in an instant. Xiao Chun was not interested in dealing with such a person. Xiao Chun scolded Yun Tianyi mercilessly. Ignoring Yun Tianyi's ashen face, Xiao Chun's gaze landed on Yun Shun as he spoke with a faint smile. When the righteous and demonic war ended, I guess that Mu Tian Mountain would definitely jump out. Xiao Chun was not surprised by Mu Tian Mountain's actions because it was very difficult to make Mu Tian Mountain submit to the sword sect. Moreover, there was definitely the shadow of other universes behind this, so it was even less surprising. Yin Shun frowned slightly when he heard Xiao Chun's words, but before he could speak, Xiao Chun continued. "I know that your Mu Tian Mountain strength has increased by quite a bit. You can even say that you've been reborn. However, I don't think I need to tell you how much of this strength came about. How much of it do you think is real in exchange for strength through such underhanded means? However, since you are willing to be the cannon fodder of other universes, I will fulfill your wish." As he spoke, Xiao Chun did not hide the disdain in his words. Yin Chen's anger continued to rise. He was already at the ancestor state, but in Xiao Chen's eyes, he was so unbearable. Yinshan could not accept this at all. In Yunshin's opinion, no matter how monstrous Xiaochen was, he was just a junior. How dare a junior talk nonsense in front of him? Moreover, he had already broken through to the ancestor state and was the true, strongest person in the Great Thousand World. However, even so, Xiaochen still did not take him seriously. This was too much. A cold light flashed in Yunshin's eyes as he stared at Xiaochen and said coldly, "You have a glib tongue. Xiaochen, do you really think that you're the only one who calls the shots in the Great Thousand World? I don't know if it is, but it is definitely not up to you." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiaochen could not be bothered to talk nonsense with Yinshan and his son. He waved his hand and interrupted Yinshan, who was about to speak. "Disciples of the Sword Sect, listen up. Destroy Mutian Mountain and leave no one alive." He directly gave the order to start the battle. Upon hearing this, the disciples of the Sword Sect were filled with fighting spirit and immediately charged toward Mutian Mountain's camp, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 25-29. The battle was on the verge of breaking out. The disciples of the Sword Sect rushed towards the people of Mutian Mountain like wolves and tigers. Facing the attack of the Sword Sect, the people of Mutian Mountain naturally wouldn't allow themselves to be captured, and a fierce battle broke out. The battle was on the verge of breaking out. The disciples of the Sword Sect rushed towards the people of Mutian Mountain like wolves and tigers. Facing the attack of the Sword Sect, the people of Mutian Mountain naturally wouldn't allow themselves to be captured, and a fierce battle broke out. Mutian Mountain was actually quite confident about this battle, and the source of their confidence was Yunshan. As long as Yunshan could kill Xiaochen with his ancestor realm cultivation, Mutian Mountain would win this battle. Therefore, before Yunshan fell, the people of Mutian Mountain naturally wouldn't retreat at all. As the two sides fought, Songxing and the other Vice Sect Masters also fought against Mutian Mountain's Vice Sect Masters. In just one exchange, Songxing and the others discovered that the Vice Sect Masters of Mutian Mountain had all broken through to the half-step Emperor realm. A glint flashed across their eyes. No wonder Mutian Mountain dared to openly declare war on the Sword Sect. It turned out that they were already prepared. However, the fact that the strength of the people of Mutian Mountain could improve so much in such a short period of time meant that someone was helping them. Just like Songxing and the others, if it weren't for Gongnan Tian, Lin Yuan, and the others, they wouldn't have broken through to the half-step Emperor realm so quickly. Now, the cultivation of the Vice Sect Masters of Mutian Mountain was the same as theirs. This clearly explained everything. However, the cultivation of the Vice Sect Masters of Mutian Mountain was obviously much more superficial compared to Songxing and the others. It was as if their foundation wasn't stable. In fact, this was also the problem of the three Vice Sect Masters. Firstly, the three Vice Sect Masters used methods to help the people of Mutian Mountain increase their cultivation. Secondly, the three Vice Sect Masters couldn't bear to spend too many resources on Mutian Mountain. Unlike Gongnan Tian, Lin Yuan, and the others who were willing to invest in the Sword Sect, Songxing and the others relied on the pills given by Gongnan Tian and the others to break through to the half-step Emperor realm. As for the Vice Sect Masters of Mutian Mountain, they obviously didn't have such good treatment. They had only broken through to the half-step Emperor realm because of excessive enthusiasm. In this regard, Songxing and the others had also sensed this at the first moment they exchanged blows. With such a superficial realm, how strong could his battle prowess be? So what if he broke through to the half-step Emperor realm? Seems like your Mutian Mountain is just as the Sect Master said. You guys use some underhanded means to increase your strength by so much. Songxing laughed coldly as he fought. Hearing this, the face of a Mutian Mountain Vice Sect leader who was fighting against him darkened. Isn't it the same for your Sword Gate? Without the experts from Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace, do you think you can break through so quickly? From Mutian Mountain's point of view, relying on Mo, he, and the others to increase their strength was no different from relying on the Sword Sect, because the Sword Sect also relied on the experts from other universes. However, although they both relied on the experts from other universes, there was a fundamental difference between the two. To put it bluntly, Gongnan Tian, Lin Yuan, and the others were willing to do so, but Mo, he, and the others were unwilling. One side was very willing to invest resources, and it was not simply using the method of spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm. On the other hand, the other side was not willing to invest too many resources at all. Instead, they chose to forcefully increase their cultivation. These two methods might not seem to be different, but in fact there was a huge difference. Not to mention that it would affect one's future achievements. Even the difference in battle prowess after breaking through would be like heaven and earth. Therefore, Song Xing sneered when he heard the words of the Mu Tian Mountain Vice Sect Master. These guys broke through for nothing, but their battle prowess didn't increase by much. The battle had already broken out, and it seemed that they were evenly matched at the moment. But all of this was about to change when Xiao Chun and Yun Qin took action. According to what was said before, Xin Yuanling was going to fight Yin Tianyi. And before this, Yin Tianyi was actually boasting shamelessly that he wanted to fight Xiao Chun, which was simply laughable. Xiao Chun, do you dare to fight me? Yin Tianyi shouted coldly as he looked at Xiao Chun. Yin Tianyi actually dared to take the initiative to challenge him. Hearing this, Xiao Chun immediately revealed a disdainful smile. Naturally, he could tell that Yin Tianyi was now an Emperor Realm Master, but so what? Yin Tianyi wanted to fight him with just an Emperor Realm, Small Perfection Realm Master. It was simply a fool's dream. He had no interest in Yin Tianyi at all. Xiao Chun sneered. You're not worthy. Xiao Chun's target was only Yin Chun. As for Yin Tianyi, he was indeed not worthy enough for him to take action personally. Xin Yuanling and Long Qing could easily defeat Yin Tianyi. Yin Tianyi's cultivation might seem to be a minor realm higher than Xin Yuanling and Long Qing, but their battle prowess was completely unequal. Yin Tianyi's aura was weak, so how could he be a match for Xin Yuanling and Long Qing? Following Xiao Qin's words, Xin Yuanling immediately came in front of Yin Tianyi and said indifferently, I'll fight you. After speaking, Xin Yuanling directly attacked without waiting for Yin Tianyi's reply, while Long Qing went straight to Mu Tian Mountain's camp and started a massacre. Only Yin Chun and Xiao Chun had yet to take action. The two of them stood opposite each other, and Yin Chun said calmly, The outcome of this battle is between the two of us. As long as I kill you, I'll win this battle. Yin Chun understood that as long as he could defeat Xiao Chun, Mu Tian Mountain would definitely win this battle. Xiao Chun did not refute this, and said with a faint smile, By the same logic, if I kill you, I'll definitely win this battle. Xiao Chun's words were full of confidence. It was as if killing Yin Chun was something that was in the bag. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Yin Chun's face turned cold. Then he laughed wildly. Xiao Chun, someone once told me that you're very arrogant. Today, I've seen it with my own eyes. However, don't you think that you're dreaming if you want to kill me? Do you know how impossible it is for an Emperor Realm Master to kill an Ancestor Realm Master? If you were a true Ancestor Realm Master, I naturally wouldn't have such confidence. However, I think you should know better than me how your Ancestor Realm came about. An Ancestor Realm Master like you can't be considered a true Ancestor Realm Master. So, how difficult would it be for me to kill you? Xiao Chun had always looked down on Yun Qin's Ancestor Realm Master. Moreover, after seeing Yun Chun, Xiao Chun became even more determined. This guy's Ancestor Realm Master couldn't be any more fake. An Ancestor Realm Master like him was just a facade. On the surface, he seemed to have the might of an Ancestor Realm Master, but in reality, he was thousands of miles away from a true Ancestor Realm Master. How could this make Xiao Chun feel fear? As his voice fell, Xiao Chun directly spoke without waiting for Yun Chen's reply. It's useless to say more. Make your move. Today, I'll let you see with your own eyes what kind of joke your so-called Ancestor Realm is. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 25:30. Xiao Qian had never put Yin Shen in his eyes since the beginning. When he heard Xiao Qian's contemptuous words, Yin Shen's face turned extremely gloomy. He was already an Ancestor Realm Master, but in front of Xiao Qian, he was still humiliated in such a manner. How could Yin Shen accept this? Xiao Qian had never put Yin Shen in his eyes since the beginning. When he heard Xiao Qian's contemptuous words, Yin Shen's face turned extremely gloomy. He was already an Ancestor Realm Master, but in front of Xiao Qian, he was still humiliated in such a manner. How could Yin Shen accept this? The killing intent in his eyes continued to condense as Yin Shen said coldly, "You have a glib tongue. Today, this king will let you know what an insurmountable gap is." As he spoke, a terrifying aura surged from Yin Shen's body. It had already surpassed the Emperor realm. He was indeed an Ancestor Realm Master. However, in Xiao Qian's eyes, Yin Shen's aura was simply too weak. Along the way, Xiao Qian had seen many Ancestor Realm Masters. Whether it was the monk and Taoist of Cloud Palace, or Gongnan Tian and Yu Luo of Immortal Palace, they were all Ancestor Realm Masters. However, their auras were far from what Yin Shen could compare with. To be honest, they were all Ancestor Realm Masters, but compared to Yin Shen, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. There was indeed an insurmountable gap between the Ancestor Realm and the Emperor Realm, and it was impossible for an Emperor Realm cultivator to jump realms and defeat an Ancestor Realm Master. No matter how high one's talent was, it was impossible to do so. After all, one was a genius, but who would be mediocre if they could break through to the Ancestor Realm? Therefore, geniuses against geniuses, heaven's pride against heaven's pride. If one wanted to surpass a great realm to defeat another, what was this if not wishful thinking? However, such a gap was built on the cultivation base of the true progenitor realm. Yin Shen's cultivation base was still far from that of a true progenitor realm expert. This was also the reason why Xiao Qian didn't think much of him. Yin Shen believed that Yin Shen himself could feel how superficial his cultivation was. However, he was still unwilling to admit it. This was a sign of stupidity to the extreme. Feeling Yin Shen's coercion, Xiao Qian's expression remained unchanged as a terrifying aura arose from his body. As Xiao Qian took the initiative to reveal his aura, Xiao Qian's current cultivation realm was completely revealed to everyone, the Emperor Realm Grand Perfection Realm. That's right, with the help of the Source Strength, Xiao Qian's cultivation broke through to the Emperor Realm Grand Perfection within a few months, even though it was just a small mass of Source Strength. Moreover, Xiao Qian's breakthrough was completely different from Yin Shen's. When Xiao Qian broke through to the Emperor Realm Grand Perfection, his aura was vigorous and there wasn't the slightest bit of weakness in it. It was simply incomparable to Yin Shen's. Peak Emperor Realm Master. Even Yin Shen couldn't help but be stunned when he sensed Xiao Qian's cultivation. How could Xiao Qian's breakthrough be so fast? He really didn't expect Xiao Qian's cultivation to have reached the Emperor Realm Grand Perfection Realm. Facing Yin Shen's surprise, Xiao Qian just smiled coldly and said, "There's nothing to be surprised about. This is the gap between you and me." Xiao Qian, don't be happy too early. Even if you broke through to the Emperor Realm Grand Perfection Realm, so what? In the end, you still haven't stepped into the Ancestor Realm. Yin Shen coldly snorted when he heard this. You speak as if you have already stepped into the Ancestor Realm. Hearing this, Xiao Qian smiled disdainfully and took a step forward, his figure instantly disappearing as he sent a punch towards Yin Shen. Facing Xiao Qian's attack, Yin Shen naturally wouldn't back down. He thought that relying on his Ancestor Realm cultivation, he would be able to crush Xiao Qian in a head-on clash. Thinking so, Yin Shen also sent out a punch towards Xiao Qian's attack. The two fists collided, but the final result was quite different from what Yin Shen had imagined. Originally, he thought that relying on his Ancestor Realm cultivation, he would be able to crush Xiao Qian in a head-on clash. But the moment their fists collided, Yin Shen immediately felt a terrifying power coming from Xiao Qian's fist. This power caused Yin Shen to turn pale with fright. In a face-to-face clash, Yin Shun was actually at a disadvantage. He already had an ancestor realm cultivation, but he was still at a disadvantage when facing Xiao Chun. How is this possible? After being forced back a few steps, Yin Shun looked at Xiao Chun in disbelief. Facing Yin Shun's shock, Xiao Chun said calmly, "Nothing is impossible. Moreover, I have already said that your cultivation isn't at the ancestor realm. Compared to an ancestor realm master, you are far from it." Xiao Chun had never regarded Yin Shun as an ancestor realm master, so he wasn't surprised at all by this result. This was within reason. His cultivation base was solid, while Yin Shun's cultivation base was extremely superficial. Comparing the two of them, it was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Yin Shun immediately roared angrily. "Impossible! I am an ancestor realm master, and you are only an emperor realm master. How can you defeat me? I don't believe it. I don't believe it." Saying so, Yin Shun attacked Xiao Chun again like a madman. Obviously, Yin Shun couldn't accept the exchange just now. He had broken through to the ancestor realm with great difficulty and was originally full of confidence, but reality poured a bucket of cold water on Yin Shun. He was actually not Xiao Chun's opponent. How could Yin Shun admit this? How could he accept this? He had broken through to the ancestor realm with great difficulty, but in the end, he still wasn't Xiao Chun's opponent. What's more, Jun Weia hadn't even appeared in the sword sect. Under such circumstances, if he lost to Xiao Chun, then what was he, Yin Shun, worth? What was he? Unable to accept this result, Yin Shun attacked Xiao Chun madly. Seeing this, Xiao Chun shook his head. Yin Shun's Dao heart was already unstable. Even if he could survive this battle, he would probably be completely crippled in the future. After a series of events, Yin Shun had indeed become a little extreme. Or it could be said that because he had forcefully increased his cultivation, many problems had appeared in Yin Shun's body. Yin Shun himself might not have noticed these problems. Facing Yin Shun's crazy counterattack, Xiao Chun didn't panic. Yin Shun, who was close to madness, was even less likely to be his opponent. Xiao Chun was very clear about this. Xiao Chun didn't even summon his dustless sword. He only used his hands to block Yin Shun's attacks. Looking at Yin Shun, who was getting crazier and crazier, Xiao Chun said indifferently, "From the day you stepped into the martial Dao, you should have known that there is no such thing as a free lunch in this world, especially when it comes to cultivation. In order to obtain power, you have turned yourself into a monster. Is it worth it?" Bulsh asterisk T. I am an ancestor realm expert. Ancestor realm expert die. Xiao Chun felt sorry for Yin Shun, but Yin Shun simply couldn't accept these words. Upon hearing these words, he immediately roared furiously with a ferocious expression. His rationality was also slowly fading away. It was as if he had lost his mind and was in a delirious state. He only thought that he was the strongest expert in the great thousand world. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 25:31. Yun Chen's ferocious face let Xiao Chen know that this guy was beyond redemption. On one hand, it was because of the pleasure brought by the rapid rise in strength, and, on the other hand, it was because he could not accept the blow of reality. Now, Yin Chun was on the verge of madness. He thought that after breaking through to the ancestor realm, he should be able to create havoc in the great thousand world. But who would have thought that before Yin Chun could truly be arrogant, Xiao Chun would mercilessly shatter all his fantasies? So what if he was at the ancestor realm? The power he obtained through such means was still unable to withstand a single blow from Xiao Chun. Unable to accept this reality, the last line of defense in Yun Chen's heart began to collapse inch by inch. An Emperor Realm Master who once stood at the top of the Great Thousand World had now become like this. And all of this was because of the temptation of power. It was understandable that cultivators yearned for great power, because every cultivator embarked on the path of the martial Tao because of power. However, a gentleman's desire for wealth was justified, and so was power. No matter how great one's power was, it was impossible and unrealistic to reap without sowing. And those who obtained power through shady means were even more despised. They were like the moon in the water, and they seemed to be extremely beautiful and could reach the heavens in a single step. But in reality, they were just paper tigers that could be broken with a single poke. If it was really like Yun Shun, who could easily make an Emperor Realm master break through to the Ancestor Realm through such means, then the Demon Abyss would have dominated a region long ago, and how could there only be a few Ancestor Realm masters in their sect? Even the Demon Abyss would not use their own people to forcefully break through to the Ancestor Realm. From this, it could be seen that they themselves were aware of the harm this method would bring. Everything was because of greed. They wanted to reach the heavens in a single step, but they did not want to put in the corresponding effort. In this way, the result could only be like this. Looking at Yun Shen's face becoming more and more distorted and his eyes becoming scarlet, Xiao Chun sighed softly and said, "A dignified Emperor Realm Master, how high-spirited you were back then. Forget it. Let this junior send you off today." Back then, Yin Shun had indeed been high-spirited. He had single-handedly established Mu Tian Mountain and led it to become one of the 10 great Ling Tian sects. Such a person should be remembered by future generations, even in the history of the Great Thousand World. What a pity, what a pity, what a pity. It was this kind of person who could be called a hero, but at the last moment, he was so ugly. His previous high-spirited and vigorous spirit was completely gone. The Wuchen sword appeared in Xiao Chen's hand as soon as he thought about it. There were not many changes to Xiao Chen's body when he held the Wuchen sword. The sword aura that should have been extremely sharp became extremely ordinary at the moment. This was Xiao Chen's improvement. Sometimes, the more frightening one looked, the more powerful one was. In this world, many things could only display their purest power after they had truly returned to their original state. Xiao Chen's sword was now transforming in this direction. It was no longer as sharp as before, as if it had been washed clean and returned to its ordinary state. However, the more it was like this, the more terrifying Xiao Chen's sword was. This was also a process that every sword cultivator had to go through. Unfortunately, many sword cultivators simply could not reach this step. They did not even have the chance to touch this threshold before their lives came to an end. His face was calm, without any sadness or joy, and without any killing intent. Xiao Chen looked at Yun Chen calmly and said indifferently, "Rest in peace and go on your way. Consider it as preserving your last shred of dignity." After saying that, Xiao Chen slashed out with his sword. The ordinary sword edge instantly attacked Yun Shun. Facing Xiao Chen's sword, Yun Shun, who had already gone crazy, clearly had no intention of dodging. He planned to meet it head-on. He had completely lost his mind. Yin Shen's choice was also proven to be foolish. With his so-called ancestor realm, it was simply impossible for him to meet Xiao Chen head-on. The sword edge swept past. Yin Shen's defense was unable to stop it all. The sword edge directly landed on Yin Shen's body. However, Yin Shen did not die. Xiao Chen had clearly expected this result. He slashed out again. This time, Yin Shun was directly killed. The intense battle between the two was, to be honest, not intense. It could be said that Xiao Chun had always held the absolute advantage, completely crushing Yin Shun. Even when he killed Yin Shun with the last two swords, Xiao Chun appeared to be very calm. This was Yin Shun, who was known to have broken through to the ancestor realm. However, in the hands of Xiao Chun, he was killed with two swords. Before he died, Yin Shun looked at Xiao Chun with a face full of unwillingness and doubt. He said, Why? I've already broken through to the ancestor realm. This ancestor realm was not broken through by you. Naturally, it is not considered your power, Xiao Chun said indifferently. Yin Shun died, and his corpse fell from the sky. The crowd, who had been watching the battle between the two, was shocked when they saw that Yin Shun was killed by Xiao Chun with two swords. The fighting spirit of the sword sect was naturally high. Xiao Chen's strength made many disciples of the sword sect extremely excited. This was their sect master, the invincible sect master of the sword sect. As for the major forces in Mu Tian Mountains camp, Their faces were all pale. Yun Shan was an existence who had broken through to the ancestor realm. However, in front of Xiao Chun, he was still killed with 2 swords. Even Yun Shan was killed by Xiao Chun so easily. In that case, what would happen to them? Yun Shan was dead. Everyone knew that there was no suspense in the battle. Mu Tian Mountain had publicly declared war on the Sword Sect. However, in the end, they were easily suppressed by the Sword Sect and did not cause any waves at all. Originally, they thought that this battle might engulf the entire world and plunge the great Thousand World into the flames of war again. However, who would have thought that the outcome would be like this? The outcome was determined in one battle, and Mu Tian Mountain was suppressed in one battle. At this moment, everyone thought that perhaps from the beginning, Mu Tian Mountain's actions were a joke in the eyes of the Sword Sect. A small grasshopper that could not even be seen on the stage actually dared to jump around in front of the Sword Sect. From the beginning to the end, the Sword Sect probably treated Mu Tian Mountain's declaration of war as a joke. The experts of the major forces who had chosen Mu Tian Mountain were filled with regret. They knew very well that they had to pay a heavy price for choosing the wrong side this time. After all, this was their own choice, and they naturally had to bear all the consequences. However, compared to the shock and fear of the crowd, Yun Tianyi's eyes instantly turned red when he saw Yun Shan being killed. He immediately locked his gaze on Xiao Chun and shouted angrily, "Father, Xiao Chun, I'm going to kill you." As he said that, he charged directly toward Xiao Chun. His murderous intent almost swallowed up the last bit of rationality Yun Tianyi had left. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 25:32. Yun Shen's death was a huge blow to Yun Tianyi. He charged towards Xiao Chun in a frenzy. Unfortunately, before he could approach Xiao Chun, he was blocked by Xin Yuanling. Yun Shen's death was a huge blow to Yun Tianyi. He charged towards Xiao Chun in a frenzy. Unfortunately, before he could approach Xiao Chun, he was blocked by Xin Yuanling. With a slash of his blade, Xin Yuanling forced Yun Tianyi back. He then said expressionlessly, "Everyone chooses their own path. You can't blame anyone for this outcome." At this moment, Yun Tianyi looked very pitiful. His eyes were red, his hair was messy, and there were many wounds on his body. They were all caused by Xin Yuanling. Just like Yin Shun, Yun Tianyi was no match for Xin Yuanling. Even though his cultivation was a minor realm higher than Xin Yuanling's, he was still no match for Xin Yuanling. Tears flowed from Yun Tianyi's eyes. Ever since he was young, Yun Tianyi had never seen his mother. It had always been Yun Shun who raised Yun Tianyi alone. In the past, Yun Shun was a godlike existence in Yun Tianyi's eyes. It was as if as long as his father was there was no need to worry about anything. He was like a mountain that shielded him from the wind and rain. No matter when or where, he could always be safe and warm. He had never thought that there would be a day when this mountain would collapse. Moreover, it was right in front of him, yet he was powerless to do anything about it. Yun Tianyi clenched his sword tightly. His fingernails pierced into his flesh as if he couldn't feel any pain. He clenched his teeth and stared at Xin Yuanling and Xiao Chun, especially Xiao Chun. It was him who had taken away his father. "Die!" Yun Tianyi spat out the word in a hoarse voice. Even though he knew he wasn't Xin Yuanling's match, he had no intention of retreating or escaping. Or it could be said that Yun Tianyi didn't want to flee anymore. After Yun Shen's death, he would no longer have a family in this world. Rather than living alone, he would rather die on the battlefield like his father. Just as Xin Yuanling had said, people had to pay the price for their own choices. Perhaps he was wrong, so he should bear the price that he should bear. Seeing Yun Shun rushing over once again, Xin Yuanling sighed. A pitiful person must have a hateful side. At this moment, Yun Tianyi was indeed pitiful, but Xin Yuanling couldn't let him go. From a moment the Yun father and son declared war on the Sword Sect, everything had already been decided and couldn't be changed. The sword in his hand fiercely slashed out. The first slash broke through Yun Shen's defense. The second slash ruthlessly landed on Yun Shen's chest. Immediately after, Xin Yuanling planned to slash out a third slash towards Yun Tiany's neck. He planned to end Yun Tiany's life. Since he was going to die, then he would give him a quick death. However, just as Xin Yuanling's third slash was about to land, suddenly, Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, and Li Chun arrived. Dao Ju even yelled, "Brother Xin Yuan, please wait. Spare him." Dao Ju tried to stop Xin Yuanling hearing that. Xin Yuanling's hand stopped. Dao Ju and the other two took this opportunity to come to Xin Yuanling's side. Dao Ju took the initiative to cup his hands and salute. "Brother Xin Yuan, what do you mean?" Looking at Dao Ju, Xin Yuanling frowned slightly. If Dao Ju was pleading for Yun Tiany, then Xin Yuanling could only say that Dao Ju's head was stuck between a door. This was because everyone knew that the sword sect would never let Yun Tiany and his son go. Everyone else could live, but only the father and son had to die. Seeing that Xin Yuanling was unhappy, Dao Ju helplessly smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Xin Yuan, please don't misunderstand. I don't have any other intentions. I just hope to give Yun Tiany a chance to end his own life." After all, they were all monstrous geniuses of the Great Thousand World. Furthermore, Dao Ju and the others had known Yun Tiany since they were young. After all, they were of similar age and status. Naturally, it was easy for them to become friends. Perhaps they weren't very familiar with each other, but seeing Yun Tiany in such a state, Dao Ju still sighed. Since that was the case, why not leave Yun Tiany with a little dignity so that he wouldn't disgrace the name of the Great Thousand World? Hearing Dao Ju's words, before Xin Yuanling could say anything, Xiao Chen's voice sounded. "Big brother, let them be." Since Xiao Chun had nodded, Xin Yuanling naturally wouldn't say anything else. He only glanced at Yun Tiany indifferently, then took a step back. However, he didn't leave. Dao Ju's pleading for Yun Tiany's last shred of dignity. Turning his head to look at Yun Tiany, whose hair was disheveled and blood was flowing everywhere, Dao Ju originally wanted to say something. However, when he opened his mouth, he didn't know what to say. In the end, he could only sigh silently. This was the cruelty of reality. The winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. Only the strong could decide everything. Dao Ju didn't know what to say. Yun Tiany didn't pay any attention to the three of them. He took a deep look at Xiao Chun, who was standing above him, with a complicated expression. In the end, without saying a word, Yun Tiany descended from the sky and slowly landed beside his father, Yun Chen's corpse. Looking at his father, who had died long ago, Yun Tiany cried bitterly. At this moment, Yun Tiany was crying like a child. Kneeling in front of Yun Chen's corpse, Yun Tiany finally regretted and said painfully, "Father, I was wrong, I was wrong." Yun Tiany regretted declaring war on the sword sect. If he hadn't insisted on going against the sword sect, things wouldn't have turned out this way. One must know that at the beginning, Yun Shen didn't agree to go against the sword sect. It was Yun Tiany who persevered and persuaded Yun Shan to agree. Perhaps Yun Shan had his own considerations, but how could it not be that he didn't dote on Yun Tiany? Yun Tiany's choice was still his father's. He had caused the death of the entire Mutian Mountain. Yun Tiany could not stop crying. After about 10 minutes, Yun Tiany slowly stopped crying and looked up at Xiao Chun, who was in the sky. At this moment, Xiao Chun was truly standing at the top of the sky, looking down on all living things. Yun Tiany was like an ant that had been knocked down to the ground and could only look up. "Xiao Chun, you've won." Suddenly, Yun Tiany shouted. His voice resounded through the heavens and earth. Everyone on the battlefield could hear his voice. Following his words, Yun Tiany no longer hesitated and raised his sword to commit suicide. His corpse fell beside his father, and the father and son hugged each other as they fell into eternal sleep. At the last moment, Yun Tiany displayed the pride that a prodigy should have. He didn't beg for mercy and only regretted what he had done in the past. He also paid the price for his choice. Xiao Chun lightly spat out a mouthful of turbid air. With the death of the Yun father and son, the outcome of this battle was already decided. "Pass down my orders. Bury Yun Shun and Yun Tiany together." begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 25:33. The death of Yin Tianyi and Yin Shun made people sigh, but it didn't affect Xiao Qin too much. After all, the father and son had chosen a dead end right from the start. The death of Yin Tianyi and Yin Shun made people sigh, but it didn't affect Xiao Qin too much. After all, the father and son had chosen a dead end right from the start. However, in Dao Ju and Li Chun's hearts, besides feeling sorry for Yin Tianyi and Yin Shun, they were also shocked by Xiao Qin's strength. Before the battle, no one would have thought that Xiao Qin would be able to kill Yin Qin so easily. All along, Yin Qin's breakthrough to the Ancestor Realm had given everyone a lot of pressure. However, in front of Xiao Qin, Yin Qin, an Ancestor Realm elite, was like a paper tiger that couldn't even withstand a single blow. Xiao Qin's confidence was never groundless. Since he said that he was not afraid of Yin Qin, then he must have the confidence to win. Regarding this, Xiao Qin used the facts to prove himself. He had indeed killed Yin Qin as easily as smashing rotten wood. With the death of Yin Qin and Yin Tianyi, the following matters were much easier to resolve. The various major forces that had chosen Mu Tian Mountain's camp no longer had any fighting power. As for the various elites of Mu Tian Mountain, Xiao Qin didn't even give them a chance to surrender. Mu Tian Mountain had to be destroyed, and there was no room for mercy. As for the other forces that had chosen to side with Mu Tian Mountain, they could be spared for the time being. However, they would naturally have to pay a corresponding price. At the same time, the major forces that had chosen Mu Tian Mountain would probably have a hard time in the future. Who asked them to stand on the wrong side? They would probably have to hand over all the resources they had, and the Sword Sect would also bestow these resources to the forces that had chosen the Sword Sect. It could be considered a reward. The outcome of the battle was very clear. With the death of Yin Qin and Yin Shun, Mu Tian Mountain no longer had any chance of winning. The battle was already one-sided. Facing the fierce attacks of the Sword Sect, Mu Tian Mountain was forced to retreat. Many of their disciples died under the swords of the Sword Sect's disciples. Before the start of the battle, who would have thought that what was supposed to be an evenly matched battle, where Mu Tian Mountain had the upper hand, would end so quickly and the Sword's Gate would emerge victorious? Xiao Qin didn't participate in the following battle. After killing a few Mu Tian Mountain Vice sects to ensure that the Sword Sect would win, Xiao Qin went to the main hall of Mu Tian Mountain to wait for the outcome of the battle. Dao Ju, Xiao, and Xiao Xiao were naturally by his side, and in just a few months, Xiao had actually broken through to the peak Emperor realm. In a few months, and Xiao's and the three of them were secretly excited about breaking through to the Emperor realm. But Xiao Qin's progress was even greater than theirs. He was now only a step away from the Ancestor realm. What was even more shocking was Xiao Qin's strength. He killed Yin Qin, who was an Ancestor realm cultivator. Xiao Qin was still the same Xiao Qin. His combat strength was unparalleled. Noticing the strange looks of Dao Ju and the others, Xiao Qin smiled. "Why do you three keep staring at me?" Xiao Qin's attitude towards Dao Ju and the others hadn't changed at all. He was very easygoing. Although the Sword Sect could be said to be a well-deserved overlord of the Great Thousand World, Xiao Qin didn't change his attitude towards the people around him because of his rise in status. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, the heartless Dao Ju was the first to laugh. "It's nothing. We were just shocked by you." Dao Ju could feel that Xiao Qin's attitude towards him hadn't changed. He still treated the three of them as his friends, so he also joked casually. In response, Xiao Qin rolled his eyes at him. Since they were casually chatting in the hall, Song Xing strode into the hall and reported to Xiao Qin. "Sect Master, there is no one left alive in Mu Tian Mountain. The battle was over. Mu Tian Mountain had been completely wiped out by the Sword Sect. From Yin Qin, Yin Tianyi and his son, to the ordinary disciples, no one was left alive." Hearing Song Xing's words, Dao Ju and the other two's eyelids twitched. It ended so quickly. Furthermore, Xiao Chun was too ruthless. No one was left alive. He had really wiped out the entire Mu Tian Mountain. Xiao Chun didn't wipe out Mu Tian Mountain completely because he wanted to give the other forces in the Great Thousand World a warning. He wanted to tell them that if they were to have any evil thoughts in the future, they should think twice about the outcome of Mu Tian Mountain. The Sword Sect had just gained control of the Great Thousand World, so they naturally had to use strong methods. Blindly showing mercy wouldn't be of much use at this point in time. In fact, it might even cause others to look down on them. Xiao Qin's expression didn't change at all. Hearing that, Song Xing only nodded slightly. Seeing that, Song Xing continued to ask, "What should we do about the forces in Mu Tian Mountain? Ask them to hand over their various resources and cultivation secret realms," Xiao Chun said plainly. Xiao Chun could let off the forces who had chosen Mu Tian Mountain, but he couldn't let them off unscathed. Asking them to hand over their resources and cultivation secret realms was their punishment. Think about it. If a force didn't have any cultivation resources and cultivation secret realms, what would happen to them? They would probably be defeated in no time. However, they couldn't blame anyone for that, as they had chosen the wrong side. If they wanted to stay alive, they had to pay a price. If they didn't have to pay a price for choosing the wrong side, they would be dreaming. The Sword Sect definitely wouldn't be interested in these cultivation resources and cultivation secret realms. When the time came, they would distribute them to the forces who had supported the Sword Sect as a reward. At the same time, it would also show the other forces that the Sword Sect was never stingy to its supporters. After hearing Xiao Qin's words, Song Xing nodded. There was no need to ask any more questions. Since Xiao Chun had said so, the forces who had chosen Mu Tian Mountain only had two choices. One was to sacrifice their wealth to save their lives and hand over their cultivation resources and cultivation secret realms. This way, their forces would fall quickly, but at least they would be able to preserve their lives. Furthermore, they might be able to slowly recover in the future. As for rejecting, they could only follow in Mu Tian Mountain's footsteps and be wiped out. Song Xing went to finish up the work. Xinyuan Ling, Long Qing, and Gu Lingyao walked into the main hall at this time. Seeing them, Xiao Qin smiled. However, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao seemed a little depressed. It was obvious that they were frightened by the battle just now. It was no wonder. Although the two of them were fearless at home, they had never experienced anything like this before. It was normal for the two of them to find it difficult to adapt to the battlefield for the first time. There was no hurry. There was still a long time before the two of them grew up. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 25-34. Perhaps they were frightened, but Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao were very well behaved and did not even dare to leave Qin Shiru and Fairy of 100 Flowers. Xiao Chun was secretly amused by this. Although the two of them were usually very daring, they were still children after all. Perhaps they were frightened, but Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao were very well behaved and did not even dare to leave Qin Shiru and Fairy of 100 Flowers. Xiao Chun was secretly amused by this. Although the two of them were usually very daring, they were still children after all. He did not bother about the two of them. As Xiao Qin's sons, the two of them would have to experience these things sooner or later. It was just a matter of time. The battle was completely over, and Xiao Chun did not need to worry about the remaining matters. Song Xing and Fairy of 100 Flowers would handle it. However, Xiao Chun was not in a hurry to go to Mu Tian Mountain. Now that Mu Tian Mountain had been destroyed, the other forces in the Great Thousand World should be more obedient. Those forces that had previously chosen to remain neutral and watch would also soon make their choice. In this battle, the Sword Sect had brought out a force that was enough to shock the entire Great Thousand World. Mu Tian Mountain, which seemed to have a higher chance of winning, was easily defeated by the Sword Sect. It could even be said that they did not even have much power to resist. This outcome had practically solidified the Sword Sect's position as the overlord of the Great Thousand World. They temporarily stayed at Mu Tian Mountain. As expected, on the second day, Many forces that had remained neutral announced that they were willing to submit to the Sword Sect. The Sword Sect had given them the answer with their strength. As long as they were not stupid, they would understand that the situation in the Great Thousand World had completely changed after this battle. At this point, if these forces wanted to continue surviving, they only had one choice, and that was to submit to the Sword Sect. Many forces expressed their stance one after another. This time, they didn't hesitate at all. Or rather, they had no other choice unless they wanted to die. Xiao Qian was not surprised by this as he had expected it. However, among the 10 great Ling Tian sects, other than the Saber sect, the Moon Palace, and the Heavenly Policy Mansion, the other sects had yet to give an answer. The former 10 great Ling Tian sects were now a second-tier force, second only to the Sword Sect. They were also one of the top forces in the Great Thousand World. If they wanted to submit to the Sword Sect, they would have to consider many things. Of course, what they were most worried about was their own interests. After all, although the Ling Tian sect looked mighty and domineering, the amount of resources required to maintain such a behemoth was astronomical. If they had to pay such a high price to submit to the Sword Sect, it would be difficult for them to maintain it. In that case, these Ling Tian sects would probably hesitate. However, after the incident at Mu Tian Mountain, the remaining Ling Tian sects had learned their lesson. They did not have the intention to go against the Sword's Gate. After all, they could not win against the Sword's Gate. Everyone knew that. Therefore, early the next morning, the people from Dan Valley and Rune Sect personally came to Mu Tian Mountain to negotiate with Xiao Qian. The people who came were the two emperors, Dan Xingyang and Fu Di. The fact that the two ancestors came personally showed that they valued this matter very much. Xiao Qian personally received them and gave them enough face. It used to be the main hall of Mu Tian Mountain. However, Mu Tian Mountain no longer existed. Everything that belonged to Mu Tian Mountain naturally belonged to Sword Sect. The main hall of Mu Tian Mountain was temporarily requisitioned. Xiao Qian, Dan Xingyang, and Fu Di sat together in a circle. There were only the three of them in the main hall, and it seemed a little empty. Without beating around the bush, Dan Xingyang took the lead and said, "The Sword Sect is really powerful now. To be honest with you, Sect Leader Xiao, the two of us are here today to discuss the matter of joining the Sword Sect." They went straight to the point and addressed Xiao Qian as Sect Leader Xiao. It was obvious that Dan Xingyang and Fu Di's attitude towards the Sword Sect and Xiao Qian had changed. Speaking of which, Xiao Qian was definitely Dan Xingyang's junior. When he first took over Sword's Gate, Dan Xingyang had even helped Xiao Qian. But now, Dan Xingyang was treating Xiao Qian as someone of the same generation, and there was even a hint of respect in his tone. However, Xiao Qian didn't care about this. He even took the initiative to say, with a smile, "Senior Xingyang, you're too kind. You could just call me by my name. There's no need for this." Xiao Qian naturally wouldn't forget Dan Xingyang's kindness. Therefore, Xiao Qian was very respectful to Dan Xingyang most of the time. Of course, this was under the circumstances that it didn't cross the bottom line. Xiao Qian respected Dan Xingyang as an elder. However, if Dan Xingyang did something that harmed the interests of the Sword Sect, Xiao Qian wouldn't turn a blind eye to it. For example, Dan Valley and Talisman Sect had to submit to the Sword Sect. There was no way to compromise or make concessions on this point. However, putting aside this issue of principle, Xiao Qian could make things more convenient for Dan Xingyang. Upon hearing Xiao Qian's words, Dan Xingyang smiled slightly. Dan Xingyang was very optimistic about Xiao Qian from the beginning to the end. However, Dan Xingyang was also very shocked that Xiao Qian could reach this step today. This little guy's progress was really too great. It was as if Xiao Qian had grown up overnight and surpassed these old guys. With the previous friendship between Xiao Qian and Dan Xingyang, coupled with the sincerity of Dan Xingyang and Fu Di this time, the following conversation was very casual and harmonious. There wasn't too much tension. According to Dan Xingyang, Dan Valley and Talisman Sect could submit to the Sword Sect. However, the Sword Sect couldn't ask for too many tributes every year. After all, The consumption of these two forces was quite large. This was the only request of Dan Xingyang and Fu Di, and it was also to continue the operation of their respective forces. After all, if all the cultivation resources were given to the Sword Sect, Dan Valley and Talisman Sect wouldn't need to exist anymore and would just disband on the spot. Upon hearing Dan Xingyang's words, Xiao Chun smiled slightly and said, "Senior, do you think I'm like a bandit now? Don't worry, the Sword Sect won't let any force give tributes. Not only that, but we will also help those forces that choose to join the Sword Sect. The Saber Sect is an example. Senior, you can ask Saber Xiong and the others. Did the Sword Sect ask them to hand over any resources?" Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun said with a smile, thinking that Dan Xingyang was worried about something. The Sword Sect indeed didn't need any tributes. The Sword Sect was definitely an existence that was overflowing with wealth. Just the various cultivation resources under their hands were already terrifying. Moreover, after becoming the overlord of the vast thousand world, the Sword Sect could be said to have completely controlled the various resources of the vast thousand world. In this way, would they still need to scheme against other forces? Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't do something like killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. If he wanted the vast thousand world to be truly stable, he would need the various forces to truly submit to him willingly. Using force to oppress others was a method, but it was definitely not the Sword Sect's goal. Submitting to the Sword Sect wholeheartedly was the result that Xiao Chun and the Sword Sect wanted. They didn't want to rely solely on using force to oppress the various forces and make them feel threatened and have no choice but to submit to them, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 25:35. The Sword Sect had never thought of seizing any benefits from other forces. Firstly, the Sword Sect did not lack these things, and ordinary treasures were nothing in the eyes of the higher-ups of the Sword Sect. Hence, there was no need for them to do so. The Sword Sect had never thought of seizing any benefits from other forces. Firstly, the Sword Sect did not lack these things, and ordinary treasures were nothing in the eyes of the higher-ups of the Sword Sect. Hence, there was no need for them to do so. Secondly, the Sword Sect wanted to control the Great Thousand World. It should not be a world where only the Sword Sect existed, but a world where hundreds of flowers bloomed. Imagine if there was only one force in the entire Great Thousand World, the Sword Sect. What would it be like? Furthermore, would the Sword Sect alone have the ability or the manpower to deal with the matters of the entire Great Thousand World? It might be possible to deal with major matters, but what about the trivial matters? Would the Sword Sect alone be able to deal with all aspects? Hence, the Sword Sect could not destroy all the forces in the Great Thousand World. To put it bluntly, the current Sword Sect, or rather Xiao Chen's idea, was to set the rules. The Sword Sect would set the new rules of the Great Thousand World, and all the major forces in the Great Thousand World would have to revolve around these rules. This was the Sword Sect, or rather, Xiao Chen's real idea. Hence, not only would Xiao Chen not exploit the forces that chose to submit to the Sword Sect, but he would even give them some benefits so that they would remember the benefits of the Sword Sect. Since Xiao Chen had given his guarantee, Dan Xingyang and Fu Di naturally had nothing else to say. They immediately expressed that Dan Valley and Fu Di were willing to submit to the Sword Sect. After hearing their declarations, Xiao Chen smiled. It seemed that the Sword Sect prestige had indeed increased greatly after defeating Mu Tian Mountain. This was good too. At least the following matters would be much easier to handle. That day, at Mu Tian Mountain, Xiao Chun held a banquet to celebrate Dan Xingyang and Fu Di's defection. Moreover, the news quickly spread. Hearing that even the Dan Valley and the Talisman Sect had submitted to the Sword Sect, more and more forces made their choice. After the banquet ended and they returned to their residence, Xiao Chun did not rest. Instead, he discussed some matters with Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing. This time, Dan Valley and Talisman Sect allegiance is indeed very important. Xianyuan Ling took a sip of tea and said, after hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Xiao Chun nodded non-committally. However, he sighed softly and said, "Now the situation in the Great Thousand World has stabilized, but it is still far from what I want." After hearing Xiao Qin's words, Xin Yuanling and Long Qing were stunned. The two of them obviously did not understand what Xiao Qin meant. The current situation could be said to be very good, but Xiao Qin seemed to be far from achieving his goal. However, in the eyes of Xin Yuanling and Long Qing, the sword sect's current development was already very good. Moreover, its position as the overlord of the Great Thousand World was already worthy of its name. The two of them did not know or could not understand what Xiao Qin was trying to say. Seeing their expressions, Xiao Qin smiled. "Big brother, second sister, what do you think of the sword sect now? It has been reborn. It is worthy of being the #1 force in the Great Thousand World," Xin Yuanling replied. Although Long Qing did not say anything, she nodded in agreement. However, Xiao Qin shook his head and said, "It's not enough. This is far from enough. Big brother, second sister, you have seen the Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace with your own eyes. The sword sect is simply too far away from these two forces." The sword sect was indeed worthy of being the overlord of the Great Thousand World. If one only looked at the Great Thousand World, the sword sect was indeed powerful enough. Not to mention that no one would be able to surpass it in the future. It was at least unprecedented. After all, in the history of the Great Thousand World, there had never been a force that could suppress the heroes of the Great Thousand World like the sword sect and make them bow down to it. From his point of view, the sword sect was indeed very strong. However, was Xiao Qin's vision really limited to the Great Thousand World? This was clearly impossible. After seeing the power and prosperity of other universes, and after seeing the Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace, Xiao Qin's vision was no longer limited to the Great Thousand World. In Xiao Qin's mind, dominating the Great Thousand World was not a goal at all. This was because this was something that had to be done. The sword sect could definitely do it, so it cannot be called a goal at all. Xiao Qin's true goal was to develop the sword sect to the level of Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace, so that the sword sect could be on par with Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace in the future. This was Xiao Qin's goal. With the sword sect's current situation, it was indeed as difficult as ascending to the heavens to achieve this goal. After all, the strength of the Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace was enough to make the sword sect, or rather, the entire Great Thousand World, look up to them. Meanwhile, if the sword sect wanted to achieve this goal, it was not something that could be done purely through hard work. The trials and tribulations they had to go through would definitely not be few, to the extent where it could be said to be unavoidable. However, this was precisely what Xiao Qin thought. The sword sect had to become powerful, had to become one of the greatest powers in the countless universes. In Xiao Qin's mind, even though the Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace seemed to be extremely generous in helping out this time, Xiao Qin was sure that there was definitely a secret behind this that he did not know about. If there was no secret behind this, there was no way Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace would help the sword sect without asking for anything in return. Meanwhile, Xiao Qin did not wish for the relationship between the two sides to continue like this. In other words, the sword sect, Immortal Palace, and Cloud Palace looked like they were partners, but with the sword sect's strength, it was truly difficult for them to climb up to these two great powers. If this continued for a long time, how was the sword sect supposed to get along with Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace? Were they going to rely on them or submit to these two great powers? Or were they going to become guns in the hands of these two great powers? Or cannon fodder? These results, regardless of which one it was, were clearly not what Xiao Qin wanted to see. That was why Xiao Qin wanted the sword sect to become stronger, to the point where they could stand on equal footing with Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace. Only like this could the relationship between the three great powers truly reach a balance. In this world, strength was everything. Regardless of who one interacted with, whether one's fist was strong or not was the most important issue. Blindly relying on the strength of others, or waiting for the help of others, Xiao Qin understood clearly what the final result would be. Meanwhile, this type of result was definitely not something Xiao Qin wanted to see. That was why Xiao Qin wanted the sword sect to become stronger on their own, to have a power that did not need to rely on a mortal palace and the sword sect's help, to have the ability to face all threats on their own. This was the goal the sword sect should pursue in the future. Xiao Qian's thoughts and goals. When they heard these words, Xian Yuanling and Long Qing stared blankly. They never expected Xiao Qian to actually be thinking about these things the entire time. Seeing the two's continuously changing expressions, Xiao Qian indifferently said, "Big brother, second sister, the great world is only one of the countless universes. We shouldn't place our sights on this. The sword sect is the same. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of this chapter. Chapter 25:36. Upon hearing Xiao Qian's words, Xian Yuanling and Long Qing were stunned. Then they smiled bitterly. It turned out that their third brother's vision was no longer limited to the Great Thousand World. It was ridiculous that the two of them were still paying attention to the matters of the Great Thousand World. At this moment, the two of them seemed to have figured out why Xiao Qian was so indifferent to the matters of Mu Tianshan previously. This was because Xiao Qian's vision was no longer on Mu Tianshan, or rather, it was no longer on the Great Thousand World. To put it bluntly, perhaps in Xiao Qian's heart, no matter what happened in the Great Thousand World, Xiao Qian would not be too concerned because the sword sect was fully capable of handling it. Since that was the case, why should he care? The position of the overlord of the Great Thousand World and the internal struggles of the Great Thousand World had long been forgotten by Xiao Qian. So what if the Great Thousand World was in a mess? It was just a Great Thousand World and would not amount to anything. Moreover, the matters of the Great Thousand World could not threaten the sword sect at all. Although Xiao Qian was the youngest among the three of them, Xian Yuanling and Long Qing had to admit that Xiao Qian was the most outstanding one among the three of them from the beginning. Even as the eldest brother and second sister, they had to look up to Xiao Qian. Seeing the two of them shake their heads and smile bitterly, Xiao Qian smiled and said, "I'm just thinking about it a little more. Eldest brother and second sister, you don't have to belittle me. No, this is different. It's not a matter of thinking or not. It's a matter of perspective." Long Qing was the first to speak up. "And second sister is right. We can't compare to you, third brother. However, we don't need to think about these things. Who asked us to have such an outstanding third brother? It's fine as long as your vision is big enough. In any case, your second sister and I will be your assistants." Hearing that, Xian Yuanling continued, "Yes, eldest brother is right. If you want me to think about these things, you might as well kill me." Long Qing laughed. Hearing their words, Xiao Qian felt a warmth in his heart. The three of them had been together for so long, and it could be said that they were completely connected. Xiao Qian's perspective and ambition did not affect Xian Yuanling and Long Qing at all. Hence, the two of them would not be jealous. Although the three of them were sworn brothers, and Xiao Qian was the youngest, it seemed that Xiao Qian was the backbone of the three of them from the beginning. Whether it was Xian Yuanling or Long Qing, they had always listened to Xiao Qian's words. After being with him for so long, these things had been deeply had become a habit, and Qing, and had become a lot's attention, had become a habit, had become a habit, had become a habit, had become a habit. After all, Xiao. Moreover, the relationship between the three siblings now, how to put it, there was no such thing as loyalty anymore. To put it bluntly, the only thing left between the three siblings was kinship. They were the closest people to each other in this world. So how could they be jealous of the people closest to them? Xiao Qian was naturally not worried about Long Qing and Xian Yuanling thinking too much. With a smile, Xiao Qian continued, "However, if our sword sect wants to grow, it will be very difficult to rely on the current situation. Although Senior Tsang Xing and the others are already half-step Emperor Realm experts, it will be very difficult for them to break through to the Ancestor Realm. Therefore, if our sword sect wants to develop, we must rope in some people with even more outstanding talent." "You mean Dao Ju and the others?" Hearing this, Xian Yuanling immediately understood Xiao Qian's meaning. Xiao Chun wanted to develop the Sword Sect into a colossus on the same level as Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace. To achieve this goal, the number of Ancestor Realm experts was indispensable. If nothing unexpected happened, the Sword Sect would soon have its first Ancestor Realm expert overseeing it, and that was Jun Wuya. After cultivating in seclusion for such a long time, Jun Wuyuan should not have any problems breaking through to the Ancestor Realm. However, Jun Wuya alone was clearly not enough. Although Long Qing and Xin Yuanling also had a high chance of breaking through to the Ancestor Realm, what about Song Xing and the other Vice Sect leaders? It wasn't that it was impossible for them to break through to the Ancestor Realm. However, compared to young geniuses like Long Qing and Xin Yuanling, Song Xing and the others were too old. Moreover, there was already a gap in their natural talent. So, it was even more difficult for them to break through to the Ancestor Realm. In this way, Xiao Chun could only find someone else. Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, Li Chun, and the other young geniuses entered Xiao Chen's sight. If they were in the same cultivation environment, Dao Ju and the others had a higher chance of breaking through to the Ancestor Realm than Song Xing and the others. He wanted to recruit Dao Ju and the others, but the prerequisite was that they had to enter the Sword Sect and become members of the Sword Sect. To put it bluntly, Xiao Chun did this because he wanted to integrate the resources of the Great Thousand World and rope in the group of people with the most talent and potential into the Sword Sect. He wanted to use this group of the most elite people in the Great Thousand World to become the most powerful force in the Great Thousand World. However, it was not easy to get Dao Ju and the others to join the Sword Sect. In other words, it was not easy to get them to sincerely join the Sword Sect. Xiao Xiao should have no problem, and Luo Xing would not stop him. However, what about Dao Ju and Li Chun? Even if the two of them were willing, would Dao Xiong and Li Xiao agree? Would they let Dao Ju and Li Chun join the Sword Sect? This was what Xin Yuanling was worried about. However, Xiao Qin smiled and said, "Big brother, I don't just want Dao Ju and the others to join the Sword Sect. I want the forces behind them as well. You want to gather the forces of the 10 great Ling Tian sects and build a new Sword Sect?" Xin Yuanling asked in surprise. It had to be said that Xiao Qin's idea was too bold. In this regard, Xiao Chun did not hide it and nodded truthfully. That's true. This is the only way to ensure everyone's loyalty. If the whole family joins the Sword Sect, would they still harm the Sword Sect in the future? That's true, but it's not easy. Third brother, you have to think about it carefully. This is something that will affect the whole situation, Xin Yuanling replied. Xiao Chun naturally knew the difficulty of this. For example, although Dan Valley and Talisman Sect had submitted to the Sword Sect, this was completely different from joining the Sword Sect. Xiao Chun had only temporarily stabilized them. However, Xiao Chun was still confident because the situation in the Great Thousand World had completely changed. It was a completely different situation from the past. Such a situation would not change in the slightest as time passed. In fact, it might even become more and more intense. When the time came, Xiao Chun would be more confident if he wanted Dao Ju and the others to join the Sword Sect. In fact, Dao Ju and the others would probably not have any resistance. After all, this was the current of the times, and it was not something that could be stopped or changed by a single person. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 2537. Based on the current situation, the development of the Sword Sect would only get better and better. In the future, the Great Thousand World would definitely be in constant contact with other universes. By then, not only Xiao Chun, but the warriors of the other Great Thousand World would also know how vast the outside world was. Based on the current situation, the development of the Sword Sect would only get better and better. In the future, the Great Thousand World would definitely be in constant contact with other universes. By then, not only Xiao Chun, but the warriors of the other Great Thousand World would also know how vast the outside world was. Once their horizons were broadened, they would naturally not place all their attention on the Great Thousand World. By then, it would obviously be much easier for Xiao Chun to merge the Saber Sect and other forces into the sword sect. Of course, this matter could only be done step by step. As of now, there was no need to rush. If Shao Chun showed that he wanted to merge the saber sect and other forces into the sword sect, it would definitely cause a backlash. Hence, it was better to wait for now. This matter was not urgent. Now, stabilizing the Great Thousand World was the sword sect's top priority. However, this was not a difficult matter for the sword sect. They could just leave it to Song Xing and the others to handle. That night, Shao Chun, Xin Yuanling, and Long Qing chatted until late at night. Shao Chun could only say this in front of Xin Yuanling and Long Qing. After all, Shao Chun had absolute trust in the two of them and did not have the slightest doubt. After a night of silence, early the next morning, after Shao Chun finished a night of cultivation, he strolled around Mu Tian Mountain. When he saw that the sword sect had taken away all the cultivation resources and cultivation mystic realms that used to belong to Mu Tian Mountain, Shao Chun smiled faintly. These cultivation mystic realms and resources might not be worth mentioning to Shao Chun and were not of much use. However, to the disciples of the sword sect, these were all good things. With these things, the treatment of the disciples of the sword sect would probably be improved. It was no wonder that they were all in a good mood when they met Song Xing and the others. The matters of Mu Tian Mountain were coming to an end. The various forces that had chosen Mu Tian Mountain had already returned and were preparing to hand over their cultivation resources and cultivation mystic realms to the sword sect. Shao Chun was naturally not worried about these forces and was not afraid of what they would do unless they did not want to live. After strolling around Mu Tian Mountain for a while, Shao Chun, and the other Qin Shu, Xiao Yao, and Xiao Lao were playing in the courtyard. After a night of rest, the mood of the two little guys was obviously much better, and they had recovered their previous mischievous thoughts. "Daddy, when are we going back? It's so boring here." Seeing that Shao Chun had returned, the two ran over and pestered Shao Chun. The initial excitement had already worn off. The two little fellows were clamoring to return to the sword sect. Shao Chun laughed and scolded them. "Why? Weren't you the ones who begged to come? Why are you leaving now?" The two little fellows grew up under Shao Chun's meticulous care. They were at a height that ordinary people could not reach. Their cultivation was not bad, but at this age, the two of them were still a little playful. Hearing Shao Chun's words, the two of them pouted but could not find any reason to refute him. After all, they were the ones who had clamored to come to Mu Tian Mountain. Seeing the two little fellows like this, Shao Chun laughed and said, "All right, we'll go back in a few days." Mu Tian Mountain definitely could not be completed in a short period of time. However, Shao Chun did not have to stay here all the time. Song Xing and the others could stay behind. Hearing Shao Chun's words, the two little fellows smiled and nodded. They followed Shao Chun to the pavilion. Seeing the two little fellows who both loved and feared Shao Chun, Qin Shu and the other girls smiled faintly. "How was it? Did things go smoothly?" Shao Chun sat down and 100-Flower Fairy personally poured a cup of tea for Shao Chun as she asked. "Very smoothly." Shao Chun nodded and replied. The dust had settled and Shao Chun could relax. Shao Chun would probably be able to accompany his family for a long time. This was something that Shao Chun had always hoped for. It was rare for him to have such a relaxing time. Shao Chun also felt the joy that he had not felt in a long time. He chatted with Qin Shu and the other girls and watched the two naughty little fellows, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao, play by the side. This kind of life was indeed not bad. While chatting, Shao Chun also heard some things about Luan Luan from Qin Shu and the other girls. "What's wrong with Luan Luan?" Shao Chun asked. "It's nothing. However, I heard that she has been very close to Qin Kunlun recently. Moreover, Qin Kunlun seems to be pursuing Luan Luan." Qin Shuru replied. Luan Luan was indeed a young lady now, and it was said that Qin Kunlun had been fiercely pursuing Luan Luan during this period of time. Although Luan Luan did not agree to this, she did not show too much resistance. It was said that the two of them had been very close recently. After hearing this, Shao Chun frowned slightly. Although this was a matter between the younger generation, and Luan Luan was not young anymore, Shao Chun did not know why, but he felt that his cabbage was being eaten by a pig. He was inexplicably unhappy. Although Luan Luan was not Xiao Qin's biological daughter, Xiao Chun had never treated Luan Luan as an outsider. Even after Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao were born, Xiao Qin's love for Luan Luan did not decrease in the slightest. However, this child had grown up, and Luan Luan was now one of the top 10 disciples of the sword sect. Naturally, she could not accompany Xiao Chun and Qin Shiru for a lot of time. Everyone could understand this. After all, a child had grown up and had her own ideas. You could not blindly force her. However, Xiao Chun had never heard that Qin Kunlun was pursuing Luan Luan all this time. Xiao Chun was naturally familiar with Qin Kunlun. This boy was the #1 disciple of the sword fanatic. He could be regarded as the eldest disciple of the sword sect. He was very talented and indeed did not disappoint Xiao Chun over the years. However, since this matter involved Luan Luan, Xiao Chun did not know why, but he suddenly felt that this eldest disciple of the sword sect was not so cute anymore. This Qin Kunlun actually dares to have designs on my Luan Luan? He sneered. Achoo. On the other side, Qin Kunlun, who was handling the matters of Mount Mu with Xiao Wan, suddenly sneezed and muttered inexplicably, "Who is talking about me?" As he said that, Qin Kunlun subconsciously glanced at Xiao Wan. After a few years, Xiao Wan had grown into a slender and elegant woman. She wore a long white dress and looked like a goddess who had descended to the mortal world. Her appearance was not inferior to Qin Shiru and the rest when they were young. In the sword sect, Xiao Wan was indeed very popular, not only because of her identity, but also because of her appearance, talent, and strength. It could be said that she was the daughter of many people who doted on her. Could it be that Qin Kunlun was unable to avoid this and fell hopelessly in love with Xiao Wan? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2538. Looking at Xiao Wan's gaze, Qin Kunlun revealed a look of infatuation. That's right, he had been pursuing Xiao Wan for a long time, but until now, they still hadn't confirmed their relationship. Looking at Xiao Wan's gaze, Qin Kunlun revealed a look of infatuation. That's right, he had been pursuing Xiao Wan for a long time, but until now, they still hadn't confirmed their relationship. In fact, with Qin Kunlun's qualifications, he could get any girl he wanted. Just in the sword sect alone, there were many female disciples who admired Qin Kunlun, but he just had to fall in love with Xiao Wan. Regarding this, although Xiao Wan didn't have much resistance, she obviously didn't accept Qin Kunlun's pursuit, which made Qin Kunlun rather depressed. Since young, he had never adored a girl like this. Sensing Qin Kunlun's gaze, Xiao Wan turned her head and said with some confusion, "Why do you keep looking at me?" "Nothing, I just like looking at you." Hearing this, Qin Kunlun revealed a silly smile. In front of others, Qin Kunlun was always the tyrannical first disciple of the sword sect, but in front of Xiao Wan, Qin Kunlun seemed to have become a silly boy. Looking at Qin Kunlun's appearance, Xiao Wan rolled her eyes at him and didn't say anything else. She knew that Qin Kunlun liked her, but Xiao Wan didn't accept it. Xiao Wan guessed that the problem was her family. Compared to Qin Kunlun, Xiao Wan naturally preferred to be by Xiao Chen's side. Thinking of Xiao Chun, Xiao Wan revealed a faint smile. It had been a long time since she ate with her father. Ever since Xiao Wan became one of the top 10 first sword disciples of the sword sect, she indeed hadn't seen Xiao Chun for a long time. Even if they met, the father and daughter would just casually chat for a while before going on with their own matters. Thinking of how her father had finally returned to the sword sect, Xiao Wan also wanted to go home when she could. Seeing Xiao Wan smile, Qin Kunlun asked curiously, "Junior sister Xiao Wan, what are you smiling about? What does it have to do with you?" "I'm thinking of my father," Xiao Wan replied snappily. "Father? Sect leader Xiao Chun?" Hearing this, Qin Kunlun immediately became speechless. Xiao Chun was definitely a huge mountain on top of Qin Kunlun. Many times when he thought of Xiao Wan's father, Xiao Chun, the person who had dominated the entire Great Thousand World, Qin Kunlun's father, as he instantly lost his tempers. Speaking, his family was obviously nothing compared to the sect. The sword sect, the Qin family was obviously nothing compared to the sect of the sword sects. That his family was obviously the compared. Was. Kunlun of Sin of this, Sins and S of A's ins in the past, T to the most definitely, T's thus. What a joke. Xiao Wan was the beloved daughter of the sect leader of the sword sect, Xiao Chun. Just this identity alone was enough for Xiao Wan to do whatever she wanted in the Great Thousand World. Who would dare to offend her? However, Xiao Wan had never used Xiao Chen's name to bully others. Most of the time, Xiao Wan had never taken the initiative to reveal her family background. In Xiao Wan's opinion, her father was her father, and she was herself. Furthermore, with Xiao Wan's pride, she didn't want to use her father's name to protect her. Xiao Wan wanted to rely on her own abilities to make a name for herself. While the two of them were dealing with the finishing touches of the Mu Tian Mountain, on the other hand, after hearing Qin Shiru and the others talk about Xiao Wan and Qin Kunlun, Xiao Chun couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. This brat actually has designs on Wan Wan. Why? Are you jealous? Hearing this, Hong Xiu asked with a smile. Xiao Chun was indeed a little jealous. However, given Xiao Chen's character, he naturally wouldn't admit it. Rolling his eyes at Hong Xiu, Xiao Chun pretended to be calm and said, "How is that possible? However, we still have to be careful about Wan Wan's matter. Whether Qin Kunlun is capable or not, I still have to personally test him." Xiao Chen said it with a strong sense of righteousness. However, as someone who knew Xiao Chen's character well, the girls knew that he was just putting on a strong front. Flower Fairy even exposed him with a smile. Still saying that you're not jealous? You're just short of writing the word jealous on your face. You, the children and grandchildren have their own blessings. Wan Wan is also grown up. Let the children handle their own matters. Furthermore, I've seen Qin Kunlun. He's a good lad, but his family background is slightly inferior. However, our family doesn't care about that. You, don't worry about this matter. Let them handle it themselves, Qin Shiru added. Qin Kunlun's family background is slightly inferior? If this was said by someone else, Qin Kunlun would probably fly into a rage. However, since it was said by Qin Kunlun obviously didn't have any temper. Indeed, compared to the Xiao family, his Qin family really couldn't be compared. Seeing that the girls were all trying to persuade him, Xiao Chun became even more displeased. Qin Kunlun, you're secretly having ideas about my Wan Wan. He didn't know what he was feeling in his heart. In any case, it was very uncomfortable. However, on the surface, Xiao Chun still pretended as if nothing had happened and said, Fine. Since you all said so, then I won't interfere. Speaking of which, I haven't seen Wan Wan for a long time. You two go and call Wan Wan back. Tonight, our family will have dinner together." While speaking Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao, Xiao Chun secretly thought to himself, "Brat, it's still too early for you to have ideas about my Wan Wan." Xiao Chun wasn't like Qin Shiru and the others. Even if Wan Wan wanted to marry someone in the future, she had to go through his test. She was his family's cabbage, and not just any pig could touch her. What a joke. Looking at Xiao Chen's expression, Qin Shiru and the other girls obviously guessed what Xiao Chen was thinking. They covered their mouths and chuckled, but they didn't point it out. Who would have thought that the ruler of the Great Thousand World, the sect master of the sword sect, would actually be a slave to his daughter? When he heard that his daughter had a suitor, he became so nervous. Xiao Chen had already decided to find time to meet Qin Kunlun, but Qin Kunlun didn't know about this at all. At this moment, Qin Kunlun was chatting with Xiao Wan. Suddenly, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao ran over. Seeing the two of them, Xiao Wan smiled and said, "Why are the two of you here?" The relationship between the three of them had always been very good. As the elder sister, Xiao Wan had always taken care of the two mischievous brats since they were young. On the other hand, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao also liked their elder sister very much. "Elder sister, Daddy is calling you back. He said that we'll have dinner together tonight." Xiao Yao was carried by Xiao Wan, and said in a childish voice. As she spoke, she glanced at Qin Kunlun. In response, Qin Kunlun naturally smiled. Qin Kunlun didn't dare to offend these two little brats. Putting aside their identities, Qin Kunlun was very clear that Xiao Wan was simply a demon who supported her younger brother. If he offended these two little brats, Qin Kunlun had no doubt that Xiao Wan would draw a clear line between them without hesitation. Sigh, he had the most terrifying father-in-law in the great thousand world above him, and two mischievous brothers-in-law below him. Qin Kunlun's future was probably going to be tough. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 25:39. When Xiao Chun asked Xiao Wan to return, Xiao Wan naturally wouldn't refuse. She immediately bade farewell to Qin Kunlun and left with Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao. Looking at the backs of the three siblings, Qin Kunlun didn't know why, but he felt a little uneasy, as if someone was thinking about him. Qin Kunlun naturally didn't know that the person who was thinking about him was none other than the sect leader of the sword sect, Xiao Chun. After hearing that Qin Kunlun was pursuing Xiao Wan, Xiao Chun decided that he would definitely have a good chat with this brat when he had the time. In the courtyard, Xiao Wan, Xiao Yao, and Xiao Lao didn't have to wait for long before they returned. When he saw Xiao Wan, a strange look flashed across Xiao Chen's eyes as he sighed. His daughter had indeed grown up. Xiao Chun waved his hand and gestured for Xiao Wan to come over. He asked with a smile, "How is it? Have there been any problems recently?" "Everything is fine. The sect's missions have been successfully completed," Xiao Wan replied with a smile. She didn't seem to notice any problems. Although Xiao Wan was Xiao Chen's daughter, her requirements were the same as the other sword fanatic disciples. There was nothing special about it. She just wanted to complete the sect's missions. When he heard Xiao Wan's words, the smile on Xiao Chen's face grew wider. "Oh, that's good. However, I heard that Qin Kunlun is pursuing you recently." Xiao Wan was taken aback when she heard Xiao Chun mention Qin Kunlun. She immediately looked at Qin Shru and the other girls. The girls had a helpless expression on their faces. After all, Xiao Chun already knew about this matter. Originally, Xiao Wan didn't intend to tell Xiao Chun about this matter. However, since Xiao Chun already knew about it, she naturally couldn't hide it anymore. Xiao Wan nodded helplessly and said, "Yes." In this regard, Xiao Chun sneered in his heart. "What a good Qin Kunlun. It seems that I really need to find time to have a chat with you." Xiao Chun didn't hate Qin Kunlun. However, when he thought that this guy actually had designs on his precious daughter, it made Xiao Chun a little unhappy. Of course, it was just a simple annoyance. Xiao Chun didn't plan to do anything. Xiao Chun asked a lot of questions about Qin Kunlun in a roundabout way. Xiao Wan blushed when she was questioned by both parties. In the end, Xiao Wan was about to explode in anger. Only then did Xiao Chun stop asking. The family had dinner together. However, this meal was very uncomfortable for Xiao Wan. She couldn't help it. After all, Xiao Chun was always paying attention to her and Qin Kunlun. After the meal, Xiao Wan didn't stay any longer and left in a hurry. Looking at the back of the girl, Xiao Chun helplessly shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Sigh, this girl has grown up. I just can't keep her. Look at her. Isn't it all your fault?" Heaven's punishment. Honored Master has broken through. Just now, Xiao Chun keenly sensed the aura of Heaven's punishment. This Heaven's punishment was obviously not of the Emperor realm, but of the Ancestor realm. In the entire Great Thousand World, only Jun Wuya was breaking through to the Ancestor realm, so there was no one else. This Heaven's punishment must have been caused by Jun Wuya. Xiao Chun hurriedly appeared outside the main hall. Soon, Xin Yuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and the rest also appeared beside Xiao Chun. Their eyes were also filled with surprise as they looked in the direction of the sword sect. "Sect Master, I'm afraid Honored Master has successfully broken through to the Ancestor realm. You can deal with the rest as you see fit." "I have to rush back to the sword sect as soon as possible," Xiao Chun replied. Since Jun Weia had broken through, Xiao Qian naturally had to rush back as soon as possible. In this regard, Song Xing and the others nodded respectfully. Then, Xiao Qian looked at Xian Yuanling and Long Qing and said, "Big brother, second sister, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Shui, Ro, and the others. I'll go first. You can bring Shui, Ro, and the others back later." "No problem. Don't worry." Xian Yuanling nodded in response. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2540. Heavenly punishment suddenly appeared above the sword sect, and it was an ancestor realm heavenly punishment. Its power could be felt by the entire Great Thousand World. Breaking through to the ancestor realm and breaking through to the emperor realm were obviously two completely different concepts. In the history of the Great Thousand World, there were not many people who broke through to the emperor realm, but there were definitely quite a few. In every era, the Great Thousand World had at least a dozen Emperor Realm Masters. But the Ancestor Realm? Since ancient times, no one in the Great Thousand World had ever reached the Ancestor Realm. To the countless cultivators in the Great Thousand World, the Ancestor Realm was obviously an extremely unfamiliar realm. But today, someone in the Great Thousand World was finally going to break through to the Ancestor Realm, and this was also the first person in the Great Thousand World to break through to the Ancestor Realm. Heavenly punishment continued to gather above the Sword Sect, and the rich pressure of heaven and earth pressed down on the Sword Sect like a mountain. On the other side, Xiao Chan rushed to the Sword Sect alone as soon as he sensed the appearance of heavenly punishment. Since Jun Weia had broken through to the Ancestor Realm, Xiao Chan naturally had to go back personally as a disciple. Moreover, Jun Weia's breakthrough at this time was definitely great news for the Sword Sect. They had just destroyed the Sword Sect and gained initial control of the Great Thousand World. Jun Weia's breakthrough at this time was undoubtedly a shot in the arm for the Sword Sect, adding flowers to the brocade. It also made the various forces in the Great Thousand World dread the Sword Sect. What a joke! Didn't you see that Mutian Mountain had just been destroyed? Jun Wen hadn't even made a move yet, and the Sword Sect had already displayed unparalleled control. Now that Jun Weia had broken through to the Ancestor Realm, he was like a great god sitting firmly in the Sword Sect, making the various forces in the Great Thousand World not dare to have any ideas, let alone go against the Sword Sect. Jun Weia's breakthrough to the Ancestor Realm was obviously beneficial to the Sword Sect, but all of this still had to wait until Jun Weia passed through heavenly punishment. With Jun Weia's foundation, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to pass the heavenly punishment. The success rate should be at least above 90%. However, one couldn't be too confident about anything before there was a result. Although Jun Weia's breakthrough was completely natural, there was no element of excessive enthusiasm in it. In this way, he would naturally have the confidence to face Sky's wrath. But even so, he still had to be cautious. Countless pairs of eyes were fixed on the Sword Sect, or rather, on Jun Weia. Chapter 2541. Xiao Qian's gaze was fixed on the depths of the mountain range. Not long after, Jun Weia's figure appeared in Xiao Qian's line of sight. Although Jun Weia was in a sorry state, he had indeed successfully passed through the heavenly punishment. Xiao Qian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Xiao Qian's gaze was fixed on the depths of the mountain range. Not long after, Jun Weia's figure appeared in Xiao Qian's line of sight. Although Jun Weia was in a sorry state, he had indeed successfully passed through the heavenly punishment. Xiao Qian also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "Master!" He took the initiative to greet him. Upon hearing Xiao Qian's voice, Jun Weia smiled and nodded. "Haha, fortunately, I did not disappoint you." After successfully breaking through to the Ancestor stage, Jun Weia's mood was obviously very good. After all, he had been stuck at the half-step Emperor realm for so many years. Now that he could truly step into the Ancestor stage, it was indeed an exhilarating matter for Jun Weia. After Junwei safely passed through the heavenly punishment, the master and disciple did not waste any time and quickly returned to the sword sect. When the news of Junwei successfully passing through the heavenly punishment and breaking through to the ancestor stage spread, everyone in the sword sect was excited. Now, the sword sect had its own ancestor stage powerhouse. When the other sects did not have ancestor stage powerhouses, the sword sect already had one. This also made the sword sect position in the Great Thousand World even more secure. When the other forces learned that Junwei had successfully broken through to the ancestor stage and safely passed through the heavenly punishment, they had to admit that the sword sect was the overlord of the Great Thousand World, regardless of whether they were willing or not. At the same time, many people began to compare Junwei with Yinshin. Previously, Yinshin was also said to have broken through to the ancestor stage, but now that they thought about it, many people found something strange. First of all, the most puzzling thing was that Yinshin's breakthrough didn't seem to have attracted any heavenly punishment. Don't say that Yinshin broke through in secret. Just look at Junwei's heavenly punishment, and you know that this was something that couldn't be hidden. An ancestor-level heavenly punishment was so powerful that the entire great wide world could easily sense it. It was simply impossible to hide it. Therefore, the only explanation was that Yinshin did not trigger the heavenly punishment at all. Breaking through to the ancestor stage, yet not drawing down the heavenly tribulation, this caused everyone to feel very strange. Coupled with the fact that Yinshin was easily defeated by Xiaochun, for a time, many people felt that Yinshin had probably not broken through to the ancestor stage at all, or perhaps Yinshin's ancestor stage was only an appearance. Chapter 2542. In the Sword Sect, Xiaochun was startled when he heard that the Cloud Palace had come to the Great Thousand World. He immediately rushed to the spatial channel. In the Sword Sect, Xiaochun was also startled when he heard that the Cloud Palace had come to the Great Thousand World. He immediately rushed to the spatial channel. The Cloud Palace and the Sword Sect were not on the same level. In front of the Cloud Palace, the Sword Sect was too small. Xiaochun knew this very well. Moreover, the Cloud Palace had treated him well, and their palace master, Lin Yun, made Xiaochun admire them even more. Now that the Cloud Palace had arrived in the Great Thousand World, Xiaochun naturally had to personally welcome them. Xiaochun did not expect the Cloud Palace to come. Xiaochun also sent a message to Nangong Wan, telling her not to be rude and to receive the Cloud Palace's people well. He also told her not to stop them and to personally escort them to the Great Thousand World. Xiaochun rushed to the spatial channel between the Great Thousand World and the Heaven Awakened World. He finally saw the Cloud Palace's palace. Xiaochun had come personally, so he was naturally invited into the palace. In Lin Yun's residence, Xiaochun once again saw the Cloud Palace's palace master, Lin Yun, and other familiar higher-ups of the Cloud Palace, including the monk, the Taoist priest, Qin Feng, Lin Yuan, Lin Hu, and the others. Haha, Xiaochun, are you surprised? The primordial world was not that interesting, so we decided to come to your big world to play. The monk was the first to laugh when he saw Xiaochun. This was the flowery monk's personality, so Xiaochun did not find it strange. He also laughed and said, "That's great. I've been wanting to invite all of you to the Great Thousand World for a gathering." Haha, look at what I said. I knew this kid had a good tongue, the monk said to the others with a smile. It was not the first time that they had dealt with the Cloud Palace, so they did not feel too distant. Moreover, the people of the Cloud Palace had a good impression of Xiaochun. Although he was still young, they did not look down on Xiaochun. Instead, they treated Xiaochun as a friend. After some small talk, Lin Yun finally said, "Okay, Xiaochun is probably very busy during this period of time, but it should be settled now, right?" Lin Yun was naturally talking about the great Kiliacosm opportunity. In response, Xiaochun replied truthfully, "Yes, it's basically stabilized. I have to thank Senior Lin Yuan and Senior Lin Hu for their help." "What's senior? You don't have to be so polite. Moreover, you call me senior but treat me as an equal. What's going on?" Lin Yuan immediately said after hearing Xiao Chen's words. Lin Yuan was obviously very dissatisfied with the way he addressed Xiao Chun. In response, Xiao Chun smiled and nodded. The tempers of the palace masters of the Cloud Palace were very much to Xiao Chen's taste. In the hands of Lin Yun, Mo Lin did not seem to have any advantage. It could be said that he had always been suppressed. This also caused Mo Lin to always treat Lin Yun as his mortal enemy and had always wanted to kill Lin Yun. Unfortunately, Lin Yun could not do anything about it, even though he could not stand it. Mo Lin's little tricks were insignificant, and Lin Yun only brushed it over. Obviously, she did not care too much about it. After talking about some matters in the Great Thousand World, Lin Yun suddenly looked at Xiao Chun and said, Xiao Chun, actually, I have another purpose for coming here this time. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun looked at Lin Yun in confusion. Faced with Xiao Chen's gaze, Lin Yun did not keep him in suspense and said bluntly, I want to invite you to the Great Thousand World. Firstly, it will be helpful for your cultivation. Secondly, you can come into contact with the outside world more. Now that the Great Thousand World has caught the attention of some people, they urgently need the birth of their own world master. If you continue to stay in the Great Thousand World, it will not be good for your cultivation. Moreover, with the current strength of the Great Thousand World, to put it bluntly, is too weak compared to other universes. This time, Mo Lin only used some small tricks. In the future, if the experts from the Demon Abyss come personally, it will be difficult for the Great Thousand World to contend with them. Therefore, I want you to go to the Great Thousand World. At least, it will help you break through to the ancestor state as soon as possible. Only then will you have the ability to protect the Great Thousand World. Lin Yun invited Xiao Chun to the macro world, the universe dominated by the Yun Palace. Xiao Chun did not expect this, but when he heard this, Xiao Chun did not hesitate and nodded. Okay, I don't have any problems with that. Please collect, vote, recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 2543. Being invited by Lin Yun to the Great World was absolutely beneficial to Xiao Chun. Even Lin Yun said that compared to staying in the Great Thousand World, go to the Great World was more suitable for Xiao Chen's cultivation. It was also more beneficial for Xiao Chun to break through to the Ancestor Realm. Xiao Chun was now a Grand Perfection Emperor Realm Master after refining a trace of source strength. He was only one step away from the Ancestor Realm. With Xiao Chen's talent, there was no doubt that he could break through to the Ancestor Realm. It was only a matter of time. If he stayed in the Great Thousand World, it would take Xiao Chun a long time to break through to the Ancestor Realm. Lin Yun believed that Xiao Chun had to become stronger as soon as possible. The Great Thousand World was no longer an isolated universe. On the contrary, the Great Thousand World had attracted the attention of many people. For example, the Righteous Tao Alliance and the Dark Age and the Origin World had begun to pay attention to the Great Thousand World. Although they had temporarily calmed down, such peace obviously could not last for long. No one knew when the Great Thousand World might become the focus of disputes in other universes again. Therefore, before that happened, the Great Thousand World had to grow as soon as possible. In Lin Yun's opinion, no one should entrust their comfort to others at any time. This was also Xiao Chen's thought all along. Therefore, Xiao Chun did not hesitate to agree to Lin Yun's invitation. After receiving Xiao Chen's reply, Lin Yun said with a smile, "There's no hurry. We will stay in the Great Thousand World for a while. During this time, you can deal with some matters in the Sword Sect." She wanted Xiao Chun to be prepared before leaving. After all, it would take a long time for them to return to the Great World. After hearing Lin Yun's words, Xiao Chun nodded. Along the way, the huge cloud palace naturally attracted the attention of many people. However, although everyone was curious, they did not dare to approach rashly because there was a Sword Sect starship leading the way in front of the palace. When did such a mysterious force appear? Why is the Sword Sect treating it so seriously? Everyone was curious and speculated about the origin of the palace. There was no danger along the way. On the contrary, it was very smooth. The Sword Sect also showed its initial dominance as the overlord of the Great Thousand World. With the Sword Sect starship, the Cloud Palace's palace could be said to be unobstructed. No one would offend the Cloud Palace for no reason. In any case, the Cloud Palace's ruling of the Great Thousand World had had the most basic control of the Great Thousand World. They arrived at the Sword Sect smoothly. When the Cloud Palace's palace stopped next to the Sword Sect, the Sword Sect's disciples were very curious. However, they obviously did not have the qualifications to come into contact with the people of the Cloud Palace. They personally invited Lin Yun and the others to the Sword Sect's main hall. Soon, Xinyuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and the other higher-ups of the Cloud Palace hurried over. Song Xing and the others naturally did not have much contact with the Cloud Palace. They only knew Lin Yuan and Lin Hu. After all, the two of them had guided their cultivation in the Cloud Palace. However, Xinyuan Ling and Long Qing were different. When they were in the Hongming world, the two of them had followed Xiao Chun to meet Lin Yun. When they met again, the two of them were pleasantly surprised. Palace Master Lin Yun? Unlike Xiao Chun, when Xinyuan Ling and Long Qing faced Lin Yun, they were more respectful and even a little nervous. After all, Lin Yun was in existence on the same level as Mu Lingxian. She was a world lord who controlled a world. They did not expect Lin Yun to come to the Great Thousand World personally. Both of them were shocked. Lin Yun only smiled and did not care much about it. To Lin Yun, Xinyuan Ling and Long Qing naturally could not be compared to Xiao Chun. Therefore, Lin Yun was obviously much colder to the two of them. Even so, Xinyuan Ling and Long Qing did not have the slightest dissatisfaction. Firstly, it was because of Lin Yun's status. Secondly, it was because the Cloud Palace had helped the Sword Sect. This was a kindness that Xinyuan Ling and Long Qing would naturally not forget. Originally, Xiao Chun had planned to hold a banquet to welcome Lin Yun and the others. However, Lin Yun rejected it. There's no need for that. It's too troublesome. Moreover, I don't like it. You can arrange the matters of the Sword Sect properly. We can also walk around the Great Thousand World, Lin Yun said. Lin Yun was not interested in banquets. Moreover, it was her first time in the Great Thousand World. Lin Yun planned to look around. Naturally, it was impossible for her to stay in the Sword Sect forever. Hearing Lin Yun's words, Xiao Chun nodded helplessly. Then, Lin Yun and the others quickly left one after another. Only Lin Feng and Lin Shui stayed in the Sword Sect. The two of them had been to the Great Thousand World before. This time, they did not leave with their father, Lin Yun. Instead, they were willing to stay in the Sword Sect. They came and left in a hurry. Xiao Chun did not know where Lin Yun and the others went. Soon, they arrived at Jun Wuya's residence. Xinyuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and the others were all there. Everyone sat together. Xiao Chun also told them about Lin Yun's invitation to go to the Great Thousand World. After hearing Xiao Chun's words, Jun Wuya agreed as expected. This is a good thing for you. There's no harm in going to other universes to see more. Jun Wuya agreed, with Xiao Chun going to the Great Thousand World. However, the only problem was the Great Thousand World